Evening, everyone. This is a school committee workshop, which differs from a school committee meeting in that we are dealing primarily with our own internal governance and sort of self-improvement for the school committee itself. And the main topics of discussion tonight are going to be the strategic plan, as well as how the school committee can better govern itself. So for those of you who might have been here for public comment, we actually do not have public comment today. Our next public comment opportunity will be at our regular school committee meeting on October 26th. Because again, this is a workshop and that's why you see some of us eating and it's less formal. So let's jump right in. Our first agenda item is review and discussion of possible 2023-24 school committee goals and priorities. I think all of you, maybe not Andy, you could pass this down to Andy. So at the policy subcommittee meeting, earlier this week, we were further refining our school committee goals and priorities for this year. We made a few changes to the previous version that many of you had previously seen. So one of them was simply to reformat a bit the text around the community engagement plan that we had discussed during the summer workshop. So now that will include school committee member visits to schools, school committee member liaison to schools. Every member shall be assigned.
What are you looking at? I'm sorry. It's right there. It's this thing? I don't know what's mine. I'm probably
either. This one.
This one's very short.
That's it.
You should have a copy too, huh?
It's goals and priorities.
Oh, I have one.
I'm so lost right now. There's too many things.
Yeah, there's too many papers.
There are two more, I don't think.
It's the 2023-24 goals and priorities.
Okay, oh, this is. Oh, I need that too.
Do our members joining on Zoom also have these documents?
They have the older version, unfortunately. I just have hard copies, but I'll certainly get them an electronic copy.
Okay.
They should already be roughly familiar with this because it was more wordsmithing. So again, community engagement plan is number one, and part of that will be assigning a school committee member to each school community. That includes not just the K-8s and the high school, but BEAT, district special programs. We also are going to be committed to greater visibility at community events and a media strategy that builds community partnerships. The second goal and priority is support the district's strategic plan. Pretty simple, doesn't need further elaboration there. But as we move on later tonight to our discussion of the district strategic plan, it's going to be important that we refine it so that it's a plan that we can really get behind and support. The third goal is something that many of us have touched on at various points, but Suzanne, you very specifically articulated that we should focus on equity with ourselves, not necessarily in terms of areas that the district is in charge of, but for ourselves. So the way this is now worded, because I know that those of you on Zoom don't have the copy, the school committee shall engage in ongoing equity-focused professional development, both self-guided and expert-facilitated, including book studies and/or discussion groups on equity-related topics, such as implicit bias, disability visibility, access, inclusion, cultural awareness, and equitable grading and assessment to improve its operational practice and analysis. Policies shall be continually reviewed and revised through an equity lens. And then the fourth goal and priority is to comprehensively review and update at least 2 entire sections of the policy manual this year. At the policy subcommittee, we discussed one of those sections being the finance one, which is quite large, but that work's already mostly been completed. So it's more a matter of getting some input from staff since we've had a lot of changes on staff and then bringing it to policy and hopefully getting that approved. And also another section we discussed working on this year potentially is the government structure section. And Dr. Guillory is going to, I think, take the lead, at least on the part of the organizational hierarchy and how we might reshape the district from an organizational structure perspective. So those are the 4 goals. Any questions, comments? All right.
I'm thinking of the last sentence, and 3 actually belongs in 4, because the rest of 3 is about school committee professional development, and that one sentence about policy, but then the next number 4 is about policy. So I think it actually goes with policy.
So we could certainly do that. It's just that last sentence was mentioning for the equity paragraph that in crafting policies, we'll make sure we look at them through an equity lens, but yes, it can be under policy as well. I think it actually fits under both.
And maybe it should be its own thing then, as opposed to buried under one of it.
Okay. Anything else? All right, then why don't we move on to.
Can I just ask, sorry, one clarification? When we were in policy the other day,
Yes,
it came up that Stephen and Val and I are working on the community, like, are we fleshing this out further?
that's right, yes. So this is just summarizing the main components of the community engagement plan, but the communications team will hopefully flesh out what that specifically is. All right, so moving on to review and discussion of current status of the district strategic plan. Dr. Guillory, Dr. Fortuna.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to invite Dr. Fortuna up, and she's going to lead the committee through an exercise tonight to do a deeper dive and exploration into the strategic plan. We also are going to then take what happens tonight, incorporate it in such a way that we come up with a drafty draft that can then be shared out to our external audience and internal audience for their reaction to it. And then the goal would be to bring it back to full committee for an adoption. And the goal is to have this all happen prior to us digging into or concluding the budgeting process. So this is going to move at somewhat of a lightning speed at this point.
Wait, concluding the budget process or starting the budget?
Starting the budget.
Okay.
process, yeah, because we wanted to
But
inform.
concluding isn't lightning speed, starting.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Fortuna.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's nice to see everybody tonight, those that are here in person and those that are here virtually. Betsy, do you have the PowerPoint? Yes, please. So you all have paper copies of the PowerPoint as well, because that will because that will help us as we do our work together. And I asked you all to bring your devices because we're hybrid tonight. And so we're going to use some technology to gather your feedback. So the way that the PowerPoint is set up, Betsy, if you can go to the next slide, is I took the goals and the mission and vision that you all voted at a couple of meetings ago. Took that and I tried to match it to the different strategic buckets that we have. So the first 2 goals that we had were, sorry for the delay. No worries. I can keep talking. I'm good at that. So the strategic plan, as in its current format, currently has 5 major buckets: teaching and learning, community connections, climate and culture, resource management, and capacity building and governance. So through the process that the community and the leadership team went through in crafting this, these are the 5 big buckets of work that we had identified.
Say that again, Jenny.
Teaching and learning,
Okay.
community connections, climate and culture, resource management and capacity building, and governance.
Even second page of
On the second page of which?
the actual.
Well, that's what I thought. Oh, I see a cross. I was going. Thank you.
So what I tried to do to make it a little bit more coherent than reading. The best introduction I've had in a while.
It's my son, I'm sorry.
What I tried to do is match it up with the community goals
Make sure.
that you voted on, each of those strategic buckets. So our first strategic objective is around teaching and learning. And that really seemed to line up with the school committee goals of joy in learning and excellence in teaching that you had. And the big objective for that is to evaluate and identify priority content areas to establish, implement, and regularly assess a cohesive, culturally relevant, consistent, standards-based curriculum delivered using evidence-based, culturally responsive instruction. Now, the reason that it has priority content areas is because we obviously, in the 3 years that we will have this plan, we won't be able to accomplish this for every curriculum area, but we do believe that we can get at least 2 done. And the 2 that we're hoping to focus on first are ELA and world language. Those are the 2 that are up first right now. And then underneath on your PowerPoint are the strategic initiatives. So if you're looking at this document, the next thing on your PowerPoint are these items that go down in the column, except they're just matched up with the strategic objective here. So our hope is, or the thought was, that these initiatives would align with that strategic objective. So we have lots of initiatives underneath this curriculum piece. We are developing a plan for our pre-K to 12 staff with professional development and coaching around multi-tiered systems of support, UDL, social emotional learning, universal design for learning. And all of that really gets wrapped up into the bucket of culturally responsive instruction. We're going to establish a scope and sequence that has common assessments for accountability benchmarks so that we know how our students are doing, so that we have data points throughout the year to make sure that our students are progressing the way that we would expect them to do. We want to establish a collaborative process for selecting high quality curriculum materials. So this is the stuff, right? We want a collaborative process. If we are choosing new stuff for ELA and world language this year, we want that process to be collaborative with the teachers, the community, the committee. Design and implement school schedules. As you've heard from our middle school report, our school schedules don't have consistent time on learning for our students. So we want to make sure that we're working to develop consistent schedules for learning in each content and across all school areas. And we want to develop a PLC structure across schools, departments, and grade levels. I was just at a great conference this week, and we realized that what we have now isn't really a true PLC. So we're looking forward to doing this work to really create those professional learning communities and those communities of practice. Any questions on that?
I have a question. So I get it all.
Yeah.
It's great. And I think it's good that you limited to ELA and world language. But I'm wondering why that's not listed then on the strategic initiative. So it's clear that that's what we're going to be doing, that we're not doing everything.
That's excellent feedback. And when you give your feedback, will you please write that so I'll remember it?
Yeah, because, can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Would that be where it should be on the outcomes section that we'll have done that for those two?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course you
While
can.
we're in the
Say that first one again, Mariah.
I didn't
in
understand that
outcomes,
feedback.
there's a following page which has the outcomes tied to each one of them. So they have their objectives, the big thing, then the second
The
one.
initiatives.
The initiatives, and then the final thing is the outcomes, which is on page 6. And so if you see on page 6, it says there's the outcomes for objective 1, but but that this is happening for ELA and world language is not listed as one of the outcomes, so it should be. Okay, so my question is, the first 1, 2, 3. This is, I'm trying to understand, I'm mapping this to that 4 and 5, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first 5, but then there's 1.6 in here, 1.7.
Yeah, that's on the next slide.
Oh, they roll on.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
This one was a big one with
Yeah.
lots of things nested underneath it. So in addition, we want, and this will be at the end of our process, we want to develop and implement an equity-driven report card that reflects the standards-based curriculum that in ELA and world language. Establish a common vision and structure for multi-tiered systems of support. Develop a vision of a graduate to inform future planning and goals. That's going to be a big piece of the NEAS work, is that years ago, there was a vision of a graduate that was developed. We've moved away from using the former one that we have. And so one of our NEAS findings is that that's continued work that we need
I don't know what NEASC is.
New England Association of Schools and Colleges. It's who accredits our high school.
And every 10 years, they come back and credit it. Actually, they
Just
redid
happened, right?
their, it's happening. I think.
Okay.
We just finished our self-study, and then the team will be coming back. You'll be hearing that report at a future meeting.
And why do we need the vision of a graduate?
Because it really drives what's happening in the district, because it gives us that vision of what.
Like
we
one
expect.
graduate, or is it like several?
It's several. It's a conglomeration of what we would expect. Like, what are the skills and values and habits of mind?
What do we want our
like a logic
graduates
model.
to look
Yeah.
like once they graduate?
I know, but I imagine we would want different things from different kids. Like, I can't imagine a single ideal coming out.
I think what happens when you do this process,
Yeah.
because I actually went to a workshop on it. Everybody in the community puts in their thoughts and ideas. And it's a way of getting the community to think about what you want from your education.
Yeah.
And, and it may be, adjectives like rigor and joy of learning and stuff like that, but it may also be, that they know how to swim when they graduate.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's-
Suzanne, you have
I
your
agree
hand
with
up.
you, by the way. Let's put it in.
Yeah, no, I've been trying for a while.
Let's do it.
Suzanne?
David, could I jump in and ask a question?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Jody, so I'm looking, a lot of these terms are really what I think of K-5 or K-8. And I'm just wondering, but some are the high school, but the high school seems to have kind of their own probing and agenda. And is world language and ELA part of the high school work? Or are they going to be sticking with the social studies and science? I'm just kind of curious what part of this is high school and what part is not.
Yep, so this is separate from the leveling of our 9th grade courses that we're working on. That's actually not captured in this plan, Suzanne, and that would be an excellent piece of feedback to provide for us. But we're currently undergoing a world language review at the high school, and our ELA review is actually going to be K through 12, so that we have a full vision of what's happening for a student from the time that they enter kindergarten to the time that they graduate in those 2 areas.
Okay, so just if I understand, but in addition to that, the high school has some other areas that they're exploring and doing the work. So,
That is true. And I would imagine that most schools would, I expect that there's going to be other pockets of work that are happening as well. And you'll see that in the high school improvement plan.
so I guess that's what I was wondering. Do we include that as part of our strategic plan, or is that kind of their own school improvement plan for the high school? I'm just kind of wondering where we put that work, because it's a significant work that they're doing.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I actually think it probably should be on our strategic plan.
Okay, thanks.
Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, do you think that all of this can be accomplished with the amount of time that we currently have devoted to professional development by reallocating that time, or are we going to need to have more?
I think we have enough time. I think we need to rethink how we use it. So I don't think we are always using our time as efficiently or as wisely as we should be. And I think if we use our strategic plan as a way to reimagine that, then we will have the time to do the work that we need to do.
Okay, so currently we have enough time in the contract and it's synchronous enough across schools that
Yeah,
that
with
we
the
can
early
make this
release
happen.
that we have, we should be able to accomplish this.
Can I ask a separate question about time? Is there actually enough time in the next 2 years to do all of these things? This feels incredibly ambitious to me.
So I'm trying to honor the work of the community and the people that put this plan together. It is very ambitious. I am not sure we will be able to actually meet all of these goals in the next 3 years. Of particular concern for me is that first initiative. That's a lot of training. And that's a lot of things.
Can you go back to that?
Yeah. It's the multi-tiered system of support, social emotional learning, understanding.
5 years of work just by itself.
Yes, exactly. So
That one.
Right there, Betsy.
what would be really wonderful is if we as a community, as a committee, as we provide feedback, choose maybe one of those areas that we really want to focus on and do well over the next 3 years. We're doing some work with MTSS this year with the new teacher center. They received a grant and they've asked us to be a partner organization with them to use liberatory design which is a new process of really focusing equity at the center of what we do for multi-tiered systems of support. And I'm looking forward to the project. It's going to actually start this spring, which is really exciting work. But if we could focus that area, that would be really wonderful. The rest of this, I think we can make great progress on in the time that we have, though I don't think they'll be fully realized. I think when we review the plan in 3 years, we'll have a more nuanced approach of how far we've actually gotten in doing some of these things.
So now I'm really confused. You said at the beginning we we're going to do ELA and world language.
Yes.
Now you're talking about a multi-tiered system of support.
Right, which is separate from a curriculum.
Yeah.
So we're focusing on the curriculum areas of ELA and world language, but when we think of pedagogy, and we didn't want to leave all the other subject areas out, because obviously we want to do work there too to continue to grow. That's where the MTSS and the universal design for learning, because that's more curriculum agnostic. It's not the stuff, it's the how.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So are we not holding you to the bullets? We're holding you to the outcomes?
That is,
Okay.
would be what I would recommend. I think the outcomes are more reasonable than the bullets are.
Okay.
But, and that's only because I know this area so intimately. So the outcomes are 85%. From your feedback, it should read 85% of educator observations in ELA and world language will show evidence of implementing a cohesive standards-based curriculum in the public schools of Brookline. Through robust Tier 1 instruction, a number of students, now this is the MTSS outcome. If we, for those that aren't familiar with multi-tiered systems of support, there's Tier 1, which is what all students get. And then there's Tier 2 services, which are what students get if they're struggling in the classroom, but they happen in the classroom. And then there's Tier 3, which really shouldn't be for more than 10% of your students, those students that aren't making progress. So what we're hoping to do and what we're hoping to have the greatest impact is what happens in the classroom for everybody with these strategies. And we're hoping that that will reduce the number of students by 20% who are receiving those tier 2 supports.
So you're,
Go ahead.
you
Sorry, I'm
said
the
something
chair.
different from
Go
what you
ahead.
just said. You said reduce by 24, but this says does not exceed 20%, which means it
Oh,
more than
yeah,
20%
sorry,
students.
I was reading the goal wrong. Yes.
It's not, but that doesn't seem like, is that appropriate in the sense of like, you know, for me, I don't understand where that 20% goal comes from. To me, it could force like kids who actually need the services to not be provided services because we're trying to meet a goal.
No, I think the way this was conceptualized, and you're very right in reading that way. I think the way that this was conceptualized is that those students won't need it because
No,
what
I
we're doing in
understand that, but I
tier
think
one
the
will be so
unintended
robust.
consequence might be that we end up actually, because we've set it as a goal and a number that is easily measurable, that we end up doing the reverse. Like kids that are kind of borderline, that in a previous scenario you would have offered tier 2, now you kind of try to keep them below the line and you don't offer it to them. And I think, so I actually don't like having a goal, but I don't know how that is numeric like that, because on a
It's
given,
not structured in that way.
in that way, I like the idea of it, of teachers, you know, like tier 1 really meeting the needs of most kids, but I don't think a goal like this. I think it's ambiguous.
Well, my reaction to that is that I was looking for an activity to match it to. So in the absence of that, it wasn't clear what was going to produce that outcome.
I believe the group that was doing this felt that if we really developed a robust multi-tiered system of support, that what would happen is that the number of students requiring tier 2 instruction would decrease.
So that was 1.1 would be producing that outcome.
Correct.
I see.
And what is the percentage today?
The percentage today varies from school to school, which is something that we really need to look at as well. We want to get rid of that variability. And maybe that is the goal, right? Is to reduce the variability between schools of the students that are receiving tier 2 services.
Isn't that variability inevitable based on some schools having special programs that others do not have?
Those services are considered tier 3 services in the specialized program, and we're really focusing on what happens at that second level that the teachers would be delivering.
So there aren't any students in specialized programs who would be receiving tier 2 instruction as opposed to tier 1?
Automatically, they're tier 3 just because they're removed from the general education environment and they're in a tier 3 program.
So
That would be in terms of their classification, but in terms of the student's experience, do they have any tier 1 experiences? I would presume so, since inclusion is.
Yes, yes. If a student is an inclusion student, absolutely.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So tier 2 would be somebody who gets extra help,
Yes.
such as a learning center or something.
Right, or a double, no, tier 2 is somebody that would get a double dose in the classroom. So say the teacher is working on multisyllabic words. Student is not making progress with the way that the whole class is learning multisyllabic words. The teacher would then pull a small group or an individual and teach it a different way, teach it another way to give them a dose of the same
Right.
content at grade level.
So really, I think to answer your question, it doesn't take away from, but I think it doesn't take away from kids who really need extra help, but may help. Well, not necessarily, because it's helping them within the class.
But it's not,
Giving
we're
them
saying
this capping it.
we're capping it. So instead of, you won't,
If there's 20 kids in the class, it's saying no more than 4 can
Are allowed
receive
to
this
do this.
service, because if we receive, if 5 kids need extra help, we've failed our
Well,
goal.
not,
I'm just simplifying at the
It's not
classroom
capped, but
level.
It's at least the goal.
But my point is, you fail the goal if you exceed that cap.
well, but you could look at it the other way.
My thoughts have coherent. I would like to make a comment. Go ahead.
We love coherence.
I'm struggling with this discussion because I really appreciate that you asked us to focus on outcomes rather than activities, because one of the takeaways for me from this book was the helpful distinction between micromanagement and accountability. So it's helpful for me to think that our responsibility is thinking about accountability through measuring these outcomes rather than micromanaging activities. The difficulty, though, is that these outcomes are all end-term outcomes, and there's no interim outcomes or midterm outcomes or outputs even. So there's no, I'm not clear on how we can establish accountability until the very end of this strategic plan.
Can I make a comment?
Wait,
When you're done, yes, because
Okay.
this is something I want to bring up later.
Okay. So, so I've been thinking as you've been talking, are there interim indicators or outputs? Like for instance, for outcome one, what seems like an obvious one to me is in the objective, the first part of it is to evaluate and identify priority content areas. So it seems to me like there could be an interim outcome of some table that establishes the curricular areas that have been prioritized for review and improvement. And that table could be something that we can review and say this is something that has been completed, so we know progress has been made. And I know that happens because you are always presenting out on that, so we know that progress has been made, but it's not documented in the strategic plan in any kind of formal way. So I'm struggling to use what seems to be like the valuable lesson of this book to not micromanage anything in this plan and to look for opportunities for accountability here. I'll stop there. That's where I'm at right now.
Go ahead, Mariah.
So I was reading this earlier, to build on what you just said. I was reading this earlier and I was reflecting on how we're supposed to be having a budget conversation in line with this. And I was thinking there's nothing measurable for FY25 here. It's all FY27. And as I was also reflecting on this first one, I thought, well, it's not really, doesn't make sense to, like, there's interim steps here. Like you need to choose a curriculum. You need to implement PD on the curriculum, and then we can then we can measure the educators applying their training and the curriculum that's been provided. Like there's some interim steps here. So is it at the end of, and I'm making that up, but maybe those are the steps, which is by the end of this year, you've picked the curriculum. By the end of next year, you've, done the PD, and then we're implementing it in the third year in our observations. So I personally, I don't know if that is quote unquote allowed in the planning for success model, if we're only allowed to have year 3 outcomes, but I think it would be very valuable to have year 1, year 2, year 3 outcomes at this level, but that just help us have like a touchstone, because also as we think about how our budget is supporting our strategic plan, if we don't have in year 1 that we need to, or year 2 that we need to buy a curriculum or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that, like, oh, we're going to need whatever it is that goes into that, whether it's, and it ties to your objective about the materials, right? Like if we're going to need to buy all new materials and like, well, that better be in the budget. Right. So I think that like having it grant annual at the scale we also need to budget for it, for me would be helpful in terms of what you're talking about, but also in terms of ensuring we're funding it the way we need to.
Even if it's not annual outcomes, if there are just some interim metrics,
Yeah,
so that we don't milestones,
Yeah.
so that we don't have to wait for the end of this plan to know whether or not we succeeded. Or if we're told during this session, we're really just looking at outcomes, and then at a future session, we'll look at milestones. That'll help me reset my expectations for how to be constructive right now.
Yeah, and I think Mariah, I don't remember now if it was Mariah or Helen, hit on the way that the process was designed, is we were directed to have the 3-year outcomes. So the team that was putting this together didn't focus on those interim, but I can hear what you're saying about their value, especially for budgeting and as we go through this process. So thank you for that feedback.
And I think we can go back and look at the historical record, because a number of those things that you're talking about were included in there. But I think Dr. Gilbert Whitner said, you want to think about the big ones. So some of these things that you're talking about were captured along the way. So I think there is an easy way to pull those up.
Suzanne, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to remind us, I think that this is the strategic plan for 3 years. I mean, that is, we're looking at the big picture. I believe we're not looking at the details. And I thought, I could be wrong, that in fact, you are working with the administrative team and administrators at the schools to think more granularly at their schools. And that we will see some of that in their school improvement plans, but that this particular presentation is an overview for the 3-year plan, so that we're always saying, you know, are we still thinking about our 3-year plan? And then the individual 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, those are going to have to come through our administrative team, both the senior level team at Town Hall on 5th floor and at our school building level teams. That's kind of how I think about this.
So Suzanne, are you saying that we're not going to have output measurement? We're not going to have outputs until at what time period? I guess, Jody, what time period will we have outputs to look at?
So the way the plan is currently constructed, it would be most likely in 27, though you would see some interim benchmarks along the way in school improvement plans and department level goals and improvement plans. But I think
we wouldn't see outputs until 27. That doesn't make sense to me.
Right. So what I'm thinking is that it's a yes and. I think it's yes, these are for 27, and based on your feedback, it makes sense to go back and capture those more annual goals that people had put into their plan.
So a suggestion, I don't know if you've looked at it was 2012, we did a strategic plan, and there were, you know, it mapped out the stuff that everybody's talking about, what the metrics were, what you would be, what the resources were that were needed, and what, from my recollection, it mapped it out nicely, so it might be helpful. You know, I don't know how wedded we are to this configuration, but it might, maybe as an additional document to this, might be helpful for everybody.
So speaking of metrics, there's mention of accountability benchmark, standards-based curriculum, common assessments, and I'm wondering whether that's going to be spelled out with greater specificity. So what are those standards? What are those metrics? So that we know, because that also speaks to our values. There are all kinds of different types of assessments. Are you envisioning that the first year would be figuring that out, spelling them out now, or that at some point along the way, maybe by year 2, we would have those standards delineated?
Yes. So year 1 would really be the year that we would either find the assessments or design the assessments. And year 2, we would know what the assessments were and what the benchmark is. And by year 3, we would be able to really evaluate if our students were meeting that benchmark. But I'm also understanding that's not clearly delineated in this plan, right? So that needs to be, I think, more specific. This is what year 1 looks like. This is what year 2 for that looks like.
What year are we in?
This, once it's voted on, will be year, and that's a discussion I actually want to ask you about, if it's a year 0 or a year 1, right? Because I think it'll be great to have this to start planning for our budget, but by the time we get it voted, it'll be the end of October, beginning of November, which will be a little late. So it might be best for it to be a year 0 and then have the year 1 be next year.
Or if there are things that could be accomplished this year from here, you know, to at least get a start on it. Yeah, exactly.
Some of it we are working on, you know, in this area, again, because I know this one the most intimately. We are working on some of those things now.
Andy?
Yeah, so I don't want to interrupt an ongoing conversation about metrics and outcomes if that's still going on, because this would change the subject a little bit.
I just have one little question. Well, I don't know if it's little. The 4th bullet, how are you measuring 80% of the PD promoting equity inclusion? It's like, is this PD sessions? Is this like number of people? What does that mean?
No, it's PD sessions.
Okay.
So our PD sessions designed to explore our values of equity and inclusion and make our teachers better at those things in their actual practice.
And what do we define as PD? Is it only the day-long activities? Is it the
It's all
educator
PD.
meetings?
So what I've started doing right now is tracking all PD that's happening in the departments. So at least I know that,
Normalized
yeah,
sessions.
yeah. Including department meetings. What's the arc of learning that's happening in those?
Can I make one more comment before you change the subject, Candy? Two things. One is I would suggest adding to the outcomes for objective 1 something about a list of the curricular areas that are under review, since that corresponds to the objective. And frankly, it's a low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And 2, I think this would be a helpful rubric for the school committee to use for the presentations that are given throughout the year. And so I would be looking at these bullets, especially if it also includes that, for report outs, and that would guide some of my questions. So it would just be helpful to me to have the objectives fully covered by the indicators under the outcomes.
Thank you.
Ask one more question. I'm sorry, but I'm really misunderstanding what common assessment system means. And I guess I come from, we were in New York City before we came here, and there was a lot of push against like testing, and even for like, is a common assessment system meaning like a quantitative new like testing system that we're putting in, or is it
Not
just
necessarily.
okay?
So
And how do basically like how will parents respond to this? Like, is there buy-in for
right.
standard base?
It may be that we just agree to give the unit assessments, the pre and post assessments at units in math that cover the high leverage standards for math. So it's something that's already happening, but we leverage them and we actually really look at the data as a community and as a system. Or conversely, it could be something very similar to what we're doing with our MClass data right now. Those decisions have yet to be finalized of what is the best way to measure our students' progress through the curriculum.
All right, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to try to step back and maybe be explicit about the philosophical underpinnings of these teaching and learning goals. So there's been this long-running conversation in Brookline. On the one hand, you have folks who have been calling for greater standardization in what we teach and how we teach it. On the other hand, you have folks who really value teacher autonomy. So with these, if we were to adopt these goals, are we basically coming down on the side of greater standardization, and we've just kind of made a strategic decision that that's what we need, partly equity driven? Yeah, if that's the case, I feel like we need to be explicit about that, or at least we need to be very clear about that in our minds, that we're actually coming down on one side of the long running.
And how, thank you, I didn't mean to interrupt you, finish. How I've been conceptualizing it in my head is based on our data and the vast fluctuations in subgroups that is showing up, especially in our MCAS data right now. How I've been conceptualizing this is if we could get 70% of our curriculum to be the same and aligned, that it's aligned to the Massachusetts state frameworks, that we're teaching the standards as the floor, then 30% would be more the flavor of the teacher and the school. So I'm thinking of it as a 70-30 split, because I don't want to lose that, right? I never want teachers to lose that creativity that they have. However, I do think there's a need in Brookline to be teaching to the state standards that I don't think we're necessarily doing right now.
Or beyond.
What?
To the standards or beyond.
Correct.
But I would agree with that, because the reality is, regardless of what any of us think, the state standards are the state standards. And so we need to make sure our students are prepared for that. And so I like this 70-30 concept of let's make sure our students can meet state standards. That's beyond our control anyways. So let's make sure they're ready. And then that 30% gives room for the freelancing and to teacher creativity.
Is it worth it to spell that out in the document? Because I feel like that's a really important point to make.
I agree. I think that would be helpful to spell out.
But I'm also curious if that, sorry,
Let's go to Mariah. Then.
Okay. I was gonna say though that just two things. One is that standards-based means you're measuring people, but it doesn't mean you're determining necessarily the way they get there, right? Like you're determining the destination, not the route. So I think it is important that, as you say, we want people to get there, but there is this flexibility for how people teach what they teach. The bigger question I was gonna ask is, you tied objective 1 to goals 1 and 2, which were joy in learning and excellence in teaching. And I guess I would ask, how do our outcomes get us closer to our goals? And what's listed here? I mean, like, does this reflect joy in learning or excellence in teaching? Maybe an excellence in teaching with a lot. I'm just saying, like, there's some, will I feel like, wow, we've gotten to the end of our goal if we've established, like, if we're not exceeding 20%. I just not sure that this is how we know we're achieving our goals.
And I may have tied it in that was Jody sitting trying to.
No,
make
but I
it
think that this
cohesive.
speaks to the larger issue of maybe the herky jerky way we got to this document. But if we have opportunities to think about how to bring it, how to tie it more tightly to some of that, I would like to see how we might be able to do that.
Suzanne? Oh, sorry, I said Stephen. Stephen,
I
and then
withdraw.
Suzanne.
Go ahead.
Okay, Suzanne?
Okay, I just thinking of conversation we've had where we've talked about the what versus the how. I think, teachers know what they have to teach and they essentially have to teach skills based on standards, the standards from the state, but the how, again, using best practice, but there is a lot of flexibility within the how. So that might, apply to that 70-30 split in a way. And the how also needs to include joy and engagement. There's no doubt about that, that if you don't have engagement and joy in learning, the kids aren't going to learn no matter what you're teaching them. So we need that as well.
There's actually research to back that up, which I learned about this week as well. So that joy and that sense of wellness and belonging is critical. It can improve student outcomes up to 50%, just by having that.
That was what Matt told us last year. I think he was saying, yeah, exactly. It's great stuff.
Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, so I really like Andy's idea of making that educational philosophy explicit in the strategic plan. But so my question is though, in what direction are we shifting if we're shifting? Do you see this 70-30 split as a movement? And in which direction?
I think it's a movement to more setting that floor as standards. Based on our data, I am not sure that the standards are always at the center of our teaching and learning and planning. And so that's where I see the shift being, and where these accountability benchmarks, even though it's kind of still to be determined how we're going to measure them, is are our students making progress towards the standards, which is something that we haven't done as a whole community. We have it in pockets, but that is the shift, I think, for us. I think if we conceptualize it just around literacy for now, we know that we need to do a better job of teaching standards, teaching the science of reading. That's what this is all about. And so I think those shifts are key for us. And I think calling them out explicitly would be helpful, but it will be a shift. It will be a change. There's, you ask yourself what stories, what narratives does an organization tell itself? And as, the newest person sitting at this table, one of the narratives that I hear a lot is we hire the best and brightest and tell them to just go forth and do what you enjoy. And that myth lives on in Brookline. And I think what we're trying to do is pull that back a little, that we hire the best and brightest, now go forth and make learning the standards joyful for our students.
So there was a parallel discussion to joy in learning a couple days ago at the policy subcommittee meeting regarding school committee mission, vision, goals. And there was a public comment expressing concern about the absence of words like achievement and words like curriculum. And I understand that it is not the district's intention to de-emphasize the importance of success, if that's how we define achievement. So I'm just wondering whether there was a conscious choice to remove such verbiage, or whether that could be.
Talking about our goals, David.
That was us.
not their
No,
stuff.
no, I understand that, but I'm
Okay.
saying in this context too, I think it's applicable. Whether we want to be explicit that of course we care about achievement, of course we care about curriculum, because there might be a perception of de-emphasis there, which is not the reality.
Oh, thank you. I hadn't perceived it like that. Thank you for that feedback, David.
Just because you said public comment and I see 30 people online and somebody in the room, maybe you want to repeat that we're not going to have public comment today.
We're not having public comment today. This is a school committee workshop, which is more around our internal governance as well as sort of ongoing structural issues for the committee itself. That's why it's a bit more informal and we're eating together and we're seated in a different manner. Our next opportunity for public comment will be at the school committee meeting on October 26th, which is next Thursday. My reference to public comment now is about public comment in a prior meeting.
I think the outcomes strongly reinforce a commitment to excellence, and by which I mean academic success. I think the first and third bullet, implementing cohesive standards-based curriculum and establishing comprehensive common assessment systems aligned to standards-based curriculum, that's a commitment to, I mean, unless we want to use a word like exceeding that standards-based curriculum, that's a commitment to academic rigor right there.
David, just so that I'm clear, the reference you made to policy was about
It was about the school committee's mission, vision, goals, not the strategic plan.
the newest ones.
Correct. So I want to be clear, that's not a criticism of this current plan. But while we're talking about this, because they are somewhat parallel documents, there are some members of the community who are just a little bit concerned sometimes when we have word changes, if that actually connotes something deeper than just a word change.
Well, hopefully it should connote something deeper than just a word change. I mean, hopefully we're not just changing words willy-nilly because, we want a word change.
That also,
Because
but that also engenders fear to some extent. So for instance, in our own document, not the district plan, but in our own document, we don't have the word achievement. So that makes people worry, well, do the schools not care about achievement anymore?
we emphasize high expectations for all students.
Right, but that doesn't necessarily mean in academics. So that just leads to some potential concerns. That's just a reality. I'm not saying that everybody agrees with it, but there are people in the community who worry about that. So to the extent that the district's strategic plan also is mindful of words we use so that those who may not be familiar with new terminology or trends are not afraid of the approach being taken.
Well heard. Let's move on.
Yeah, we're not going to get through this today.
So, Betsy, we're going to skip a few slides. What I'm hearing from the committee, and I want to make sure that I'm hearing it, is that our focus should be on outcomes tonight. Okay, so we will do that. Our next big strategic objective is to develop and implement a culturally responsive community engagement plan that fosters connections among families, schools, the district, and the greater community. And we tied that to celebration of difference because we felt that we really needed to recognize the diversity in our community in order to be effective communicators, and an ethic of wellness because it really talks about building positive relationships and creating a more caring and just world. So we thought that those two were tangential, maybe not as tightly aligned as we would like them to be. And if we go to the outcomes, I had an fancy electronic way for you to give feedback, but you're doing it so well verbally that I'm skipping over this.
I was so excited to try Padlet.
So here are the outcomes. The district has developed and implemented clear expectations, systems, and protocols for communication with families as measured by the presentation of exemplar procedures and
What
protocols
does that mean?
to the school committee.
Exemplar.
No, I know what exemplar.
I don't know. That was the word you said.
No,
I
I
forgot.
know. I meant, what does that phrase mean, as measured?
As measured, so I believe, because the charge was to make this measurable, that the group that was doing this felt that if we presented to the school committee communications and systems and structures for communication, that would be the measure.
Oh,
of doing
okay.
this.
Okay, no, I was reading it wrong. Thank you.
Attendance verification for professional learning opportunities around implementation of those communication protocols at the central administration and school level, and feedback from families about how we're doing communicating out.
Question I have about professional learning opportunities. Are you referring to professional development, something broader than that?
Something a little bit broader. So for professional learning around a communication protocol, an example would be if we revitalize the district crisis team and the school level crisis team, right? We would need to provide professional learning for people on how to do that, do crisis management and do that well. If we are really working on unbiased communication and making sure that, I'm pulling from some recent examples, and making sure that we're truly meeting the needs of our community, then that would require some learning and some growth for our staff.
I like the feedback from families. I think ultimately the rest of this is how you do it, not what, it's like the how, not the what. And so for me, the focus is the caregiver and maybe another community survey feedback reaching a certain metric of satisfaction. Because the exemplars and the learning, that's all what you're doing. And those are a hard thing to, they're not as easy to measure or as measurable as strictly, do people feel like they're getting the right amount and the right quality of feedback?
Thank you.
Also, within the feedback from families, are there particular mechanisms that are contemplated for soliciting that feedback? I know that currently it's fairly typical to utilize the email system, but there's occasionally been criticism that doesn't reach absolutely everyone. So I'm just wondering how else we can capture family input.
The Panorama survey also has a family input piece about their belonging and their feeling of how we're doing with communication as well. So that would be the other metric that we currently have in place that we could use.
Track metrics around what % of parents open like your messages.
There is a way.
I mean, I know we
Yeah.
do it with our newsletter. It's very low, like 5% of emails or something. I don't know.
I was
if
actually
yours-
talking,
I'm hoping it's 50. No,
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 hers is
no,
not.
mine. I'm
Yeah.
hoping yours would be like 50 or 60%.
I was talking with Neil about that, so we are digging into those metrics.
I'm
as well,
sure
but it-
SMORE must have that.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
It's built in there. Yeah. Same with the schools as well.
Maybe we can try and set, that would be a measurable, it would require then us to encourage parents through other ways to open those. But I think that would be a metric that would be easily measurable. I don't know. if it
A lot
captures-
of data, there's a lot of data about how open rate is not actually a valuable metric.
Right.
And I think, I'm just saying, there's actually a lot of data about that. I think that ultimately, email isn't the only form of communication, right? There's a lot of different ways we need to measure whether people feel I think it's more of a holistic measure, as I guess, that I feel about it.
I also think we need to make sure we're measuring in subgroups, right? So we're measuring in terms of English not being a first language, in terms of MEDCO, in terms of families with students with disabilities, and making sure that we don't just have a high open rate or even a high read rate, but with whom we're engaging as well.
It's made explicit under objective 3, so we may as well do the same here.
Can I just note that the third bullet really nicely captures goal 3. Seems like an excellent indicator for accountability towards that goal.
Which one are you talking about? I'm sorry.
The third bullet of objective 2 outcomes, I think is a good metric for progress towards goal 3, culture of collaboration, which is all about partnerships with the community.
Can we just talk about, I'm sorry, can we go back to the second outcome there on objective 2? I'm just curious where 20% annual increase comes from.
He was aperture.
Yeah, okay.
Honestly.
What was your answer, Jen?
There's a 20% annual increase each year in the number of families who report favorable opportunities to engage in PSB experiences. I'm not sure what that sentence means in general. Like, what is a favorable opportunity to engage in a PSB experience? I'm not sure why 20%. Does that mean we're growing essentially like 60% over the 3 years?
You don't know where we started.
I don't know where we started. Are we talking about 3%? We're going to 5%? Are we talking about 60% and we're going to 90%? Like, what's happening here? I'm not quite sure. So,
I think we can get that from Panorama and be more thoughtful, deliberate about that.
and the school belonging one seems much more
Yeah.
clear to me, but it's interesting. And it also doesn't specify a percentage. So if we're noticing what we would consider to be a positive trend in the decrease, I mean, that to me seems reasonable, which is it's going in the right direction from
Yes.
where it's at.
Thank you. That was a good question.
I'm curious, why 6 new community resources? Are there 6 out there?
You know,
I hate to say it,
I think there are. I'm not sure we're tapping.
but are there 6 new ones?
I don't know. And
Because there may be ones that we have that have sort of, not,
Yeah.
I think it's a good goal.
that aren't.
2 a year?
Huh?
2 a year?
No, but are there that
They
many
exist.
community resources out there that we want to foster access to?
Just because you know them all, Helen.
No, I don't know them all, but that's a lot.
Well, and also beyond that, quantity doesn't always necessarily mean quality.
Exactly.
So if, of course,
Someone's
there,
scrambling to make a bad partnership at the end of the year to meet their metric.
exactly, so I don't want us in a position where, oh, we got to grab that 6th community partner if we're doing great with 5.
Yeah, right. The other thing I guess I would like, are we thinking about things like Cartwheel this past year, which I'm not sure that we count them a partnership, but it is a funded relationship that is valuable to the community. It does all those things, but I guess I'm not really sure what partnership, like there, I personally would count Cartwheel in there, but I'm not sure it actually meets the criteria that you have outlined.
Think about all the liaisons we have. Those are partnerships.
I think maybe,
We want 6 more. I mean,
I think maybe another way to look at this would be as percentage of the student body that has a partnership and see that increasing. So it's not so much how many community resources there are, but what percentage of our students are utilizing them, whatever they may be.
or accessing them and not have been
How would we
utilized.
measure that? How am I going to know if someone signs up for Brookline Rec?
Have them report it, surveys.
I mean, we can't survey every single thing about people, and these surveys are already very long.
Well, the liaisons could report that.
You can go survey everyone to find out if they use Brookline Rec and then.
No, I'm thinking about the community connections for early.
Suzanne, go ahead.
I mean, I know there are kids who are using it and it's a very, somehow we need to, what we're trying to measure here is not clear.
Yeah.
I think that's where the
Yes.
problem is. I don't think it's 6 necessarily new ones, but what is maybe having a better sense of what's out there and that principals access them, that students and families can
Yeah.
access them.
We can point to success stories in there. I mean, real success stories of collaboration. or
Yeah,
whatever
no,
it is.
and it exists
Yeah.
today. I think we just don't know about all of them. Or some of us know about some of them.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, thanks. But one thing to think about is what is it that our students and families need? And
Mhm.
so, going from there, but there could be things that are available, but we're not really taking advantage of. For instance, you can have groups come and do dental work for our children right at the school. They set up a portable little clinic. We can have vision vans that come. I don't know how much of that we're actually doing right now, but I think if we take a look at what our students and families need, that may be a place to get some community.
Collaboration with the Department of Public Health.
But yes, of course, I hope we have that.
That's happening already. I mean, that's an active collaboration, so it wouldn't count. Yeah.
Enhanced collaboration.
But there may be very specific needs at particular schools that we would encourage those kind of connections and partnerships with. That would
This
help.
goal- Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Was this goal 3 and 5? This one? Sorry, I've lost
Go
6.
forward.
4 and 6, okay.
Yeah,
But it really is 3 too. Yeah. I guess one thing I would say is we probably should map multiple goals, like you should do a crosswalk because so many of them reference, and then it'll be like less painful to try and map them.
Yeah, I think it looks like at least part of the school committee is very happy to hold you accountable for something less than what you suggested here, like something, if not new, at least enhanced uptake of existing community resources would be sufficient for some people.
Yeah.
Some people.
Others may want 6 new ones.
I mean, for me, the point of the goal was the aspiration behind it, to have increased community engagement in it. So as long as the goal is something that incentivizes PSB to reach out to the community to provide services to students, that's the point of this.
Yeah.
But so as long as it's reasonable and achieves the purpose of creating that incentive, it will make sense to me.
So what I'm hearing is in either enhanced partnership, well, and it's not an either, enhanced partnerships and student and family access to those partnerships.
Yes.
Okay.
And
And exploring other opportunities that might be out there. Such as the senior center.
So you thought of one we're not using.
I did.
yet.
But they're not a
Because
community
they actually
resource.
talked to me about it, so that's why.
should we look at objective 3?
Huh?
Should we go to objective 3?
Yes. So strategic objective 3, I did not tie to a school committee goal.
Well, but I think that ties to goal 4.
I wouldn't get too stressed
Yeah,
about
right.
which goals you tied to what, because let's just go back and,
Excellent.
yeah.
All right.
We'll work through.
Yeah.
So objective 3 is a smaller objective with a fewer number of initiatives under it. The outcomes are around a sense of belonging. So the big goal is develop a climate and culture in which all students, staff, and families experience a strong sense of belonging and safety. Based on what we know about research, we know that these are 2 areas that should be a focus for increasing outcomes for students. So our main measure for this would be using the Panorama Teacher and Staff Survey. At least 80% of PSB staff,
Nancy, do you mind advancing the slide to the this one? Yeah.
should be the next one.
That was it.
It wasn't. It had panorama on the top.
No, you go back to the,
There we go. Using the Panorama Teacher and Staff Survey, at least 80% of PSB staff will endorse a strong sense of belonging by the end of 2025 to the 2026 school year. When a staff has a sense of wellness and belonging, it increases the sense of wellness and belonging that students have, and then increases student academic outcomes.
31 is the current rate, and also that this is a next year goal, not a 2027 goal. So
This is the next year
and
goal.
what are we now at?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I do
I
know
hope it's
Matt.
below 80.
It is below 80. Matt wrote these goals, so I'm confident that we're in a good place with the metrics. We really want to look at some of our more marginalized communities, and we want at least 80% of those students endorsing that strong sense of belonging. Because again, it's important. And if we look at our achievement data where we have gaps, this is a place that we have gaps. It's also a place that we have gaps in our panorama survey.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so on that one, I mean, that seems like a worthy goal, right, for an outcome, but none of the initiatives under this heading seem to be sort of targeted at achieving that, right? That's not going to happen, I think, without a dedicated effort. There's nothing specifically among the 5 initiatives
Right.
that speaks to that.
So now this isn't an OTL plan. This is a PSB plan, right? So where's OEE here under 3? What's OEE's role?
Or more broadly, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen on its own, like given the 5 initiatives that are there. So there needs to be something that is specifically aimed at achieving that one outcome.
Yeah. We can work with Claire to determine what would be the best for that.
Or, it could be something that's part of each of the, or some of the existing initiatives.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be something explicitly targeted at this one.
In general, I think it might be helpful if the outcomes referenced, or alternatively, the objectives reference the outcomes, or the outcomes reference the objectives, so we could actually tie which objectives the staff thought were contributing to which outcomes.
Where do you see the Office of Educational Equity contributing to outcome 3, objective 3?
Well, there's the strong partnership that exists between OEE and OTL when you're looking at the culturally responsive approaches, as well as it's a place that I see it, as well as the access to resources for community. But I do agree, the conversations that I've been having with Claire, that there's some opportunity to make this more robust. So I think this is the opportunity to infuse a stronger language and actions here as well.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like under Janae, there would have been a 3.6 conduct regular professional developments across PSB for staff around X, Y, and Z, because that was a major focus for her at a culture shift, right? I don't know Claire as well, so I don't know what her philosophy is for running OEE. But I know Janae was saw a lot about the use of PD for shifting culture, and I don't see that in the current one.
Suzanne, go ahead.
Yeah, just, in fairness, Claire was not here when this work was done, so she hasn't had a chance to have her input. I also think this is, again, where you're going to see the input from the schools at the school level. This should be a part of their school improvement plan at each school. And I would expect that Claire would work with each of the administrators of the schools to flesh out and kind of determine what their plans are going to be for their specific schools. And also this SEL curriculum will address at least the pre-K to middle school grades and helping students feel that they have a strong sense of belonging. So there is something specific in here, but there's a lot that's not in here that I think each school needs to think about.
Are the last 2 bullets, should they be duplicated under objective 1? Because they're really about selecting a curriculum.
Yes.
Amelia?
I like the chronic absenteeism one, and I'm wondering if there's something around teacher retention. I mean, with the foreign language, we heard a lot about teachers like leaving, and I don't know if that's too ambitious to think about teacher satisfaction through retention somehow.
So I'm wondering if that's included under the first bullet about staff endorsing a sense of belonging and wellness. If the teacher retention if that's the first step towards actively creating human resources.
I mean, I think it's
program for
important.
retention.
I'm not saying no. I'm just wondering if a more ambitious goal would be around teacher retention. So,
Actually, years ago, we did this, or somebody at Harvard did a study at the high school on the mentoring program that we had and the retention from that program of new teachers who came in. And the numbers were incredible. The teachers that we wanted to keep stayed unless they moved out of state, like because of family reasons or
so
something
that's a
like
great
that.
both initiative and an outcome.
Yeah,
I don't know. I wonder if teacher retention.
but we're still doing some of that mentoring, so it may be time to sort of revisit that, use the same sort of metrics that we used back then to see if that works. It's still true.
Can we build on that one to reflect the subgroups that we want to ensure that we have a strong sense of belonging, going back to our concerns about losing teachers of color and how we ensure we're retaining that strong sense of belonging across all subgroups as well?
Yep.
Thank you.
Andy?
Yeah, I was just going to strongly endorse Natalia's suggestion of making that an outcome. And we do have a fairly recently passed policy sort of aimed at that outcome as well, that maybe lists some of the groups that we would want to be looking at.
Excellent.
So I'll third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, or eighth that. That we should explicitly spell that out. Another question I have, in terms of all students have equitable access to all academic and extracurricular activities offered by PSV. I certainly love that one. It's very ambitious, but I wonder, do we have the capacity to get there within 3 years based on scheduling logistics, based on contractual limitations? Because realistically, for a certain subset of our student population, pullouts occur. Pullouts realistically are going to occur during non-core subject times. And so I'm just wondering how we would ever arrive to that.
I think one of the ways to conceptualize this is this idea of at a team meeting. And we've been thinking a lot about this with the world language problem, students missing world language because they're receiving IEP services. And that's been a decision that's been made kind of arbitrarily. I'm thinking if we really think about at a team meeting, giving the parents the option of students have to miss something. We don't have enough hours in the school day to do this, allowing parents to help choose what the student is missing, if that might get to that a little bit.
That's not equitable though.
Well, why
Do
not?
you want to cut off your arm or your leg? It's not saying you're allowed to retain all your arms or your legs. As a parent who's had to make those choices and been asked that question, and it
Yeah.
wasn't.
So would you rather them make the choice for you then?
I think the point is you'd rather not, it's not equitable if you have to make the choice. If you, then I think that we're not necessarily setting that up. I think David's right to question it.
No, the question is valid.
Because if we're going to commit to making that possible, that realistically means lengthening the day in some way or having multiple shifts, which obviously would be a bargaining issue. I think it's a goal that's worth undertaking, but are we prepared to really engage in the work that it would necessitate?
I'm not sure we're ready as a system, honestly,
And then,
in the
how-
next 3 years.
and how do we then still keep this in focus so that we don't get 6 or 7 years down the line and we're still in the same spot? So it's this notion of how do we keep it on the, on the big board, on the game board, recognizing that we may not be able to fully realize it within this time frame, but we still don't want to lose sight of it in the long run too.
Can we say something like, oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, I was going to just say, I would be concerned that if we pull it away or lose sight of it, then 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now, we're going to be at a similar spot.
Well, at the high school, for example, there's been discussion of, for example, there's kids who need speech 1 day a week, but they're losing an entire week's worth of that block and then 4 days have nothing. And so can we do things like, can we think about, I'm making this up, 2 specific ways that we're going to increase academic and curricular activity access? I don't know if 2 is the right number, but my point being, can we think about for example, quarter credit classes that meet 1 day a week to allow these kids to have, or 3/4 kid, whatever it is, to allow these kids to be able to have additional academic opportunities, because that aren't just blocked out because they've got once a week, whatever they're whether it's OT or PT or whatever they're working on, as one example.
So the outcome isn't all students, but like new processes or new.
Or in the middle school,
initiatives.
for the kids who are getting pull-out services during world language, maybe we do a world language morning session twice, like, I don't know, I'm just spitballing ideas, but how can we move the needle ahead without saying we're going to solve it universally?
All right, anyone else on this one? Go ahead, Mariah.
I have a question on bullet 5. Have we administered the Panorama teacher and staff survey ever? Is this a new thing? I don't know, we've had the student survey. I don't know that I've seen
This
this.
is a new thing.
Okay.
We
That's,
haven't
yeah.
done the teacher and staff survey.
Okay, so that's why I was like, why, that seemed like an odd thing to call out,
Yeah.
but now that I know it's the first time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool with Justin?
Is it cool with, say it again?
Do the survey.
Can we do that?
We're not having.
It's funny that you said that. I thought we had done this before.
I thought so too. That's what.
This would be the first year. Have we done it before? It may have a
I
different
think
name,
we've done it before.
but we've done it before.
I-
That's my recollection too.
Well, we didn't get it reported in the past couple of years.
think pre-pandemic.
Oh, okay,
Pre-pandemic.
pandemic.
Okay, so we're redoing.
Redoing.
But I guess the point is, it's going to be an annual thing, right? The way that's written sort of just made me think like this is a one and
Yeah,
done.
no,
Okay.
it'll be an
Yeah.
annual thing. And moving forward.
So it's really like starting to administer.
Or maybe at least
Okay, as opposed to-
annually. Maybe
yes.
take out the once and put annually.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? It's really for the school committee as well as for PIA, the administration. The most intentional change we made to our core values was the last sentence of goal 5 about that we'll do everything possible to ensure that private resources do not determine student outcomes.
Mhm.
I mean, it seems to me that a lot of that work is actually school committee work to make sure that opportunities like extended day are extended to all families. But I guess I wanted to ask the administration if there are any activities that you feel can help achieve that goal over this 3-year period as well, since it was a high priority for us.
So I think one of them we're working on right now at policy with the Life of the School inclusion,
Right.
which is all fine and good as a policy, but we also have to make sure that there's the financial support to actually make it happen. So I think that's maybe a question for Dr. Gibbons or maybe you, Dr. Guillory, about, is this something that we can afford to do? And if
It's
so.
a question for now, you mean?
No, not this
No,
second,
okay.
but to figure out what percentage of our budget or what the number would be that we need to dedicate to essentially equalizing the financial playing field here so that everybody has access.
Right. I agree with you, David. I think that it's not really like at the level of inputs and outputs that is the bulk of this strategic planning discussion. I guess I mean to ask, are there any inputs and outputs that can contribute to the achievement of this goal that belong in the strategic planning discussion that you've considered? Or does it really belong entirely? Yeah, okay.
So we instituted a new math curriculum.
Yeah.
K through 5 now?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one where, parents are going outside doing
Yeah.
Russian math. Can we somehow see if this new curriculum is leveling the playing
So
field?
excellence is your response.
Huh?
Improving the quality of our curriculum is one way to
Yeah.
respond, right?
I thought it was
I
really.
mean, people aren't going to take their kids and put them in a program if they don't think they need it.
Mhm.
I would think.
Yeah, same as like fighting, same with literacy, same with
Music,
Gillingham's, right.
music, choir, whatever. I mean, sometimes you do that because the kid shows some
Right.
incredible aptitude, but
Aaliyah?
I mean, I think your question and that whole goal 5, that it's not mapped on outcome 1, and I know we spent a lot of time, and I think we should, like, it's teaching and learning, like, we have nothing about, you know, the MCAS scores being like inequities or the advanced math, like in 9th grade being primarily white students, like I feel like those, the outcomes under 1 don't have much on equity and, or capturing some of this private resources. So I really think, and I've said this before, every time we've seen this, that because we have 5 goals and they have an equal number of bullets, but actually the first one, most parents would say, you know, teaching and learning is the core part of schools, and equitable outcomes are just not seeing it in, it's a lot of focus on teaching, but not the equitable outcomes. And so I would really want us to have like 10 outcomes under 1 that really capture some of these inequities that we've been talking about, like a narrowing of the gap between, I don't know, and I don't
I'd
know
like
where.
to see, you know, like that we think about our goals, whichever goals tie to each outcome, that we have a specific, or whichever they tie to the, what do you call them, the objectives, that we have outcomes that tie to the goals that we've, you know, that we've outlined, because then we
Yeah.
can really see that crosswalk. But,
Yeah,
and I think you're right, and we think about commitment to equity, and is it present there?
and I see it in
Missing,
other
right.
places where we're kind of calling it out, like here in the climate and culture, but if we don't have a commitment in equity in terms of learning outcomes, and
Mhm.
I worry that,
So that usually comes up in the context of discussing MCAS scores.
yeah.
So would that be the measure?
I mean, that would be one of them that we've narrowed, we've done, or at least that, you know, some sort of measure there, or, I mean, it came up about how many 9th grade students were getting into advanced math.
Yeah.
Like a metric around something like that.
Access
like
to
an
AP
improvement,
classes
access to
or-
AP
right.
classes, like it doesn't have to be just MCAS, like, what does it look like? What do our classrooms look like? I think we can, I don't know.
There was a whole bunch of stuff that was presented by STEPS last year about a lot of different measures that
Yeah.
were about, you know, passing all of your classes and so forth, that were other ways to
Yeah.
measure what was going on.
Yeah, I would like us to measure that 9th grade piece. I think that's critical, right? I mean, we had a presentation from a student who schooled us on how that was going, and you know, I think that that's really problematic, and something we can work on in a 3-year chunk. I mean, MCAS is one measure, but there are so many other measures, like you said, Mariah, the STEPS presentation. But I really think if we look at how we're setting up our students in both the elementary and then setting them up for high school, you know, those are both inflection points where we really need to make sure that we're doing right by all of our kids.
Sorry, take us back to 1, but.
It's okay.
you know, I think we have to be careful here, guys. At one point, we said, you know, this is too much to do, and now we're even adding more.
No, we're not
the
at
out-
it.
it's the
We're not at
outcomes.
it.
It's just the
Yes.
outcomes.
It's just that student outcomes actually need to be one of the things we measure,
Yeah.
not just,
Okay.
not just initiatives undertaken.
All right.
And I think, you know, we talked about that tier 1 goal. I think that's where we insert it. I think we replace it because that's what that goal was intending.
Yeah, but I think
Together.
that can be misused.
Yeah.
mean,
No, I agree.
yeah.
I'm saying we
Yeah,
replace it with what you
one with,
just
you know,
suggested.
some actual.
Yeah.
Or increase the number of outcomes that we're measuring.
And again, thinking about the subpopulations as well, which
Yeah.
wasn't in the tier 1.
Right.
And it sounded like in the context of 9th grade placement, those subpopulations would not necessarily be by race, gender, income, but also by school. Because we also have some disparities just by virtue of the school that a student is rising from when getting to high school.
The other piece of information you want to know is how many kids were put in honors ended up going down to standard, and how many were put in AP. You know, and probably math is the easiest place to look at that. Because you know, you could be put in, but you might drop down after the first 2 weeks.
And this is actually what I discovered this week is a national problem. Yeah, and it's systematic of us not giving in tier one the skills and structures that our students need to be successful in those classes. So we de-level, we put students in those classes, but then they elect themselves to move out of those classes because we haven't done what we have for them to feel prepared and as if they belong there. It's a national trend, which I didn't realize. It's nice to talk to colleagues from other states and
I think it's important not to underestimate. Again, we're writing this plan with some degree of time boundedness, being 3-year, 5-year, all of that. But I think I'll say it, but I think it goes without saying, this notion of really digging in on tier one instruction and the overall. So I think that's a response that I would offer. You know, what are the deep investments that we can make? We can invest in solid tier one instruction, which is professional learning for our educators as well, that then helps assist or shift the trajectory of our students. And I don't think we want to minimize that. That in and of itself is a powerful driver to get at what Jody is just talking about there as well.
that's how we disrupt disproportionality.
I think though we do need at least one more strong indicator committing to reducing disproportionality by race in something other than belonging. Because I feel like you've heard me repeat myself on this because we've had so many presentations on those disproportionalities in academics, in SEL, in referrals to special education, in discipline, in a number of other areas, but there's no commitment to reducing those disparities in any other area except for belonging. And as this is a 3-year strategic plan, I think there needs to be a commitment to reducing that disparity in here.
I thought we just talked about that.
Where?
We just agreed to it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, like 3 minutes ago. To replace the tier one outcome with something that references meaningful
I thought you were talking
academic,
socioeconomics.
no, meaningful academic measures and with also subgroups, measuring overall and by subgroups.
Sorry for misunderstanding. That's great.
Natalia took us back to.
Yes.
Go on.
Sorry for the soapbox.
We were right. Better that the soapbox be right then.
The last time the soapbox.
Suzanne?
You know, as we said, this objective 3 is really connected again to OTL. It's hard to separate them. Certainly you don't want to, but there's a couple initiatives that I have a lot of hope for. The coaching that just a group of them went down for a conference on coaching, how to coach our teachers and how they can peer coach and work really together. And the professional learning communities, which we have hit or miss. And those tools or those opportunities really do help teachers think about these tier one programs and outcomes. And I just really feel like if we concentrate on a few of these that we know are very powerful for teachers and very helpful, that we will see some outcomes that we want based on those initiatives. So I'm very excited about the work that has been started and that Jody's really promoting. So.
On the socioeconomic, getting back to that discussion, I'm wondering to what extent you envision the Office of Student Services alerting students of potential opportunities for those who are contemplating college, which is the vast majority in this district. Specifically, I'm thinking about AP tests. And the reason I'm thinking about that does become an economic advantage, because if a student loads up on AP tests and gets high scores on them, you can actually pretty easily reduce college by a full year. And yes, the AP test costs money, of course, but relative paltry sum compared to a full year of college. And I think making students aware of that, you have the double benefit of both encouraging students to excel academically, to pursue those AP tests and also save significant funds.
Yeah, David, I think there's still work, it's still out there about what the data on the AP. A lot of colleges are no longer accepting AP as credit. Doesn't mean they're not all, but I don't know. People are re-examining the value of AP. Doesn't mean it's not great. It could well be for certain students, but it's not clear that you would get a year's worth of credit in college. So
Even a half year is good.
And Northeastern kids routinely pass out of the entire first year.
do they really? Well, that's great.
Oh, yeah, it's happening
Oh,
routinely.
really?
Oh, yeah, kids come in with umpteen AP credits.
I just want to make sure our students are aware of that because it's something I took advantage of to some extent, and it's huge financial savings. And then it also encourages students to excel at the high school level.
I graduated a year early with a double major because of AP.
But I think that that ties into so many other things of access that we're actually talking about here, right? It's like, it's all well and good to say those things if no one placed you in AP or discouraged you from going into AP.
You actually don't have to take an AP class to take the AP exam.
That's true.
Obviously, it obviously helps, but
It obviously helps is like the understatement of the century. You're a full year ahead.
How
by the
many
time
did you take?
A lot.
Sorry.
But the point being, I was encouraged
Mhm.
and not everyone is, and that's,
Let's do objective 4.
yeah, I'm ready.
All right, this one is much more clear cut. Now we're starting to talk about resource management.
And yet, keep going.
So the big bucket for this is to develop resource management and capacity building systems that will ensure educational and organizational goals are accomplished timely and with transparency. And you can see the outcomes there.
Can you pull up the outcomes, Betsy?
There.
So I have a question. What is the educational plan? This is the strategic plan. Is this the educational plan?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Look. Well, this says, and will be directly connected to achieving the vision and strategic plan. So what's the educational plan?
The educational plan is really the strategic goal one of the educational plan. It's that everything that we've been talking about, right?
It includes your school improvement plans,
Plan.
district improvement plans, things of that nature, which all should align to your strategic plan. So you have your strategic plan and then those other plans are in service to accomplishing that.
So money to do panorama so that we can measure.
Wait, I'm still not clear. We
Yeah.
have our strategic plan. I heard one person say just now that objective one was our educational plan.
And
I heard other people saying, no, it's the school improvement plans.
Includes all of that.
Okay, I would really like to understand what our educational plan is to like, because I just,
Yeah.
it needs to be like something we can actually,
or at least the components of it,
Of
so
it.
we know what's being referred to.
exactly. I would even love to know what those, like, is it just the school improvement plans plus objective one?
But I think you have to be careful because there's a certain amount of our budget that is sort of set. You know?
Well, I'm just asking literally what the terms on the
I
screen
understand.
mean.
That's why I'm questioning.
Well, but I think, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to when you say are set, but I'm sure there's some subset of things that we
You
agree.
have to teach kids in kindergarten, first grade, second.
Sure,
grade.
yes.
Fair question that Mariah's asking.
Yeah, I do think it's fair.
And I guess my question would be again, like, and it just ties to the comment I made earlier, which is when I came in, I was like, I'm not sure how we would develop the budget, like if there's specific things that we're aiming towards in those intervening years.
We can elaborate on that.
Yeah.
Julia?
Because I don't know how the budget is set yet. Class size, where does that fit in? Because I know parents have been asking about that in terms of budgetary allocations. Is that a budgetary decision or is that?
Mhm.
So they were going to
Class size here, sorry.
more detail with our next discussion, but certainly if you want to address how that fits in with the strategic plan.
It certainly has a budgetary component and it also has a policy component with the class size caps that we strive for. It fits in lots of different places.
And like, are we explicit? I mean, I've heard what the cap size like guidance has been? Like, do we articulate that in our strategic plan, or is that it has always been the same and we're fine with not articulating it?
It's not currently in the strategic plan because it exists other places.
So school committee used to have in their budget goals, you know, we will keep class size low. That was one of our
And
goals.
I like that as an outcome of some form, that class sizes.
But we have to be careful. If you can't
I
put
know.
a number there, but you know, I think that has always been our goal. And I think, in my opinion, this year is somewhat of an aberration in terms of that.
Can I ask another question? The first one, what do we mean by cost center and fund?
I'm gonna leave that to the expert.
So are we talking, because our budget has been by school and by program? I guess I'm thinking we should be using words here. We want to use cost center and fund, but I'm not sure what you actually want to report on. I'm not sure cost center and fund is what you want to report on.
Well, cost center funds is what the standard is.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that we kind of move towards what.
So we're gonna start calling, like, if I'm
What's
a
a
person
cost
on the
center?
street, how do they know what a cost center is, I guess is my point. How are we gonna link this to what people see?
Right, can you maybe just explain what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So your the education reform law actually defined how we are supposed to set up our structure educationally, and then it's by building. And then there's certain areas where you have district departments. And so those are considered cost centers. They're not called buildings because they're buildings and some district level departments together these comprise what are called cost centers. Sometimes they you might use terminology here like your budget managers. But your budget managers and the way they're defined here are not really cost centers. So using that term, I mean, we can say if it's more commonly used here, we could say schools and departments. If
Are we gonna be
better
reporting by
suits-
funds?
suits the way
What is the fund?
that you think about it, we can certainly use those words. That equals cost center, but if cost center is something that's appealing to you, we can certainly say, schools and departments. That's your preference.
I think it's.
I just think it has to be defined, and, maybe we need like a glossary for this, but I
Yes,
just think it needs to be defined.
And are we reporting all the way for every fund as well? So we're gonna report on all the revolving funds?
Oh, yeah, we're supposed to.
We're supposed to, I know,
Yeah.
but I guess I'm just confirming that that's what we're
Yes.
actually gonna do. Great.
But I think schools and departments is just, for most people in the world, is much clearer than
That's fine.
Well,
cost
no, I
center
think we
and
can say
fund.
cost center and it can say school schools, school, program or something like that. It'll
Yeah,
help, yeah.
parentheses, yeah.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
So what is fund then?
Funds are your general fund, your special revenue funds, your gift,
Okay.
grants, revolvings, yeah. So it's all funds that together allow you to pay for all of your educational services, so. Okay, we've asked, it'll be great. I'm excited.
Jody,
Yes, yes.
what questions you're asking.
1,000 times, yes.
so this objective also has capacity building in it. There's not really an outcome relating to capacity development, I don't think. It says develop in one place, I think in the third bullet. There's an activity 4.4 about a learning academy. Could you say a little bit about what that is?
I'm gonna defer to Susan again because
Okay.
we have the expert in the room.
Thanks,
And
Susan.
And I'm not looking at the documents.
Why don't you come to the table with us?
Activity 4.4 is create a learning academy designed to build the capacity of all staff to perform their roles in service.
Page you're looking at?
Yeah.
Page 4 of the chart.
Wait, of the document. So,
Yeah.
okay.
That seems to be the one that
Your shoulder.
links
Yeah.
to capacity development.
Okay, so now your question, now that I've read that.
Learning academy.
So one of the things that is really important for the success of any organization now is to be able to help staff when they come into the organization to be able to develop the skills necessary to be successful no matter what their role is. And so as we set these higher expectations or different expectations, then there needs to be robust professional development and program development. And so the Learning Center would be where we would develop that programming for staff in order to meet our expectations.
Is this physical materials? Is it virtual? Are these modules?
Combination thereof. We would house this at the Baldwin School, where we would keep curriculum resources and have available space to be able to engage in, staff development and other professional.
Administrative staff or in-service teacher training or both?
Both, paraprofessionals, substitute teachers, custodians. There should be not only onboarding, but there should be induction programming, and then there should be ongoing, support and training throughout the continuum of somebody's career. Yeah.
Let's go back to objective 1.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's not just teaching, it's all areas. So there'd be curriculum developed in order to be able to support, the kinds of expectations that we're setting for our staff to be able to achieve our goals.
It's a pretty big activity.
It is, it's very
Okay.
exciting and absolutely necessary, because one of the things that's challenging is that when staff come into educational organizations, you lose a great many of them within the first 5 years. And that's your biggest investment. And part of that is based on the experience that they have. And in American education, I would argue that we could do better in supporting staff when they come into our profession.
Great. Thanks, Sue.
Susan, could we specify that more to be about induction and onboarding?
It's not just induction and onboarding, because it's over the career arc of a person's career. So your mentoring programs could be housed there as well.
I'm just having,
Leadership academies.
I'm having trouble distinguishing it from our professional development goal and objective 1. I think now, I don't think I had a clear understanding of that.
Okay, so maybe you and I can talk and make sure that we're using language that aligns across and or differentiates where.
In my head, yours was specifically about educating
Yes.
and yours was about everything else, but that might not have
Up to
been.
including.
Yeah, right. Okay, so, okay.
But yeah, hangs together for sure.
And it could be,
But it's bigger than just that.
Hmm.
and it could be this notion of sort of defining out, again, the milestones. What's year 1, what's year 2, what's year 3? How do you grow it? Identify sort of the repository where you may want to start also.
And in my personal goals or goals for A&F, they completely align with accomplishing that. So I have
Yeah, okay.
goals in FY24 that align to step 1 of accomplishing that. And then next year we'll build on that. So, yeah.
I would
Absolutely.
imagine in some future steady state, they would have a lot of overlap. But in the beginning, there's so much like fundamental work to be done that actually they probably don't overlap for a while, right?
Elia?
And it's not just teaching and learning. Again, it's when you have substitute teachers that come in, in what ways are we supporting them so that they can feel like they're armed with the skills and the expectations are clear about what we're hoping for them. And, so it's not just teaching, but it's.
Sounds like you're talking about organizational knowledge more than that your domain is more professional development.
I think it's part of it's organizational knowledge, but other parts of it are the skills we want people to develop in order to be successful in the role and to help us to achieve the expectations that we have overall within the organization.
Elia?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, I could see, since we're starting like this Create a Learning Academy, this Learning Academy could be something pretty small, or it could be something huge, like continuous learning for all the teachers. What is the budget implications of something on the huge side versus the small? Like, have we thought about since we're putting it in the strategic plan as an initiative, and we've just said that the budget should be guided by this, like I worry that then we basically are saying that, like, I don't know how big in your mind this is going to be versus how, like, it could be a huge initiative if you really wanted.
I think part of it is in the labor market that we have, we want to be able to attract the best talent we can for each and every position and then support them so we retain them.
No, I mean,
Yeah. And
I believe
so,
in it too, but like, do we have a price tag with it? Like, you know, when I hire people, I have per person like a professional development budget. And it sounds like the professional development piece already exists, but this is an entirely new building and structure. Are there going to be staff who like lead these, like full-time people who are going to be the trainers? Like, I just don't know how big we're talking or something.
I think part of this, at least in our initial conversations about it, wasn't that we're going to add big staff. We have expertise within our organization to be, and we provide much of this in some ways. Mentorship programs. I know Jody's staff have mentoring programs. We have some induction programs that just isn't as broad and maybe as deep as we'd like to have that. And so as we're thinking about, you know, moving folks from Clark Road who would then have office space there, you know, in order to be able to support the Learning Center, because coordinators and all of us, you know, are engaged in development.
Yeah, no, I believe in it. I believe in it. I just think that a learning academy could be a big thing or a small thing, and I don't know what we're doing.
Yes, and I think over time, you're right, it could be something that could be very robust. But I think initially, at least beginning to get some programming in place and devoting some effort into developing that would be beneficial.
Suzanne?
Yeah, thanks. Two things. One is we have done this in the past. The Sperber Center was a place for a learning center for teachers with many different curriculums, for resources. It was a part of the Pierce School there on the School Street side. I think we lost that when Pierce needed the space, but we have done this kind of thing in the past. So it's not completely new at all. And I think it was valuable. It's just that it's over the last couple of years, we've lost that. And then the other thing I want to say is that we talked at Finance the other day that we are fortunate to have a good number of grants that come in every year. And I'm wondering if there's any way that grant money that's not specifically dedicated to a particular purpose might look at our strategic plan and use some of that money for some of these initiatives that we wouldn't otherwise have the money for. And so I don't know if you consider that when you said all funds, if you considered grants or not, but if that should be considered.
Absolutely, and that's a great example of how you would use these resources, all funds, to be able to support your overall strategic and school improvement plans.
Or probably.
It's not always, I would say taxpayers are the court of last resort, not the first place you tap.
And there are grants out there that might enhance some of our objectives, like Jody was saying.
Absolutely.
So,
and it also positions you when you have this for being able to go after grants, because now you know what's attractive to you and what will help support the work that you're doing. Also helps you vet grants. You know, what do we want to go after? Because if it's not in service to accomplishing our strategic plan, then maybe we're better off passing on that. Right?
Can I make one, changing the subject to away from Learning Academy? I just would request a word change, that we change marketing to communicating about our budget.
yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Item 5.
All right, we made it to the end. Five. All right. So this is mostly about clarity and consistency, this particular goal, and how we're going to use our strategic plan and how we are going to use our infrastructure to really get to where we want to be as an organization. So the big goal is design and implement. Oh, I turned it on before I read the big goal. That's okay. Again, because it was financial was where the equity match, but we're not going to worry too much about matching it together. The big goal for this one is design and implement an organizational structure and related information systems that will enable the organization to achieve its vision. Thanks, Betsy. So these are the outcomes.
Can I make one comment about this? To me, information and data should be present here and I don't see them here. Maybe I'm missing them, but like whether it's a dashboard or whatever, it's not here that I can see it.
So we can add that in. I know we are actually working on a data dashboard.
Similarly, my
I
reaction,
know we all care about it, like just put it here.
my reaction was similar, is that is there some kind of website output for this work? Can the website be updated with any governance improvements that are made?
A lot of these in general feel somewhat like immeasurable, like we're gonna say, well, we're gonna do them and then they'll be done, but they're not really, I guess, like some of them feel a little more crisp than other ones, like the district consistently assesses and reviews, that's not like measurable. So I think it would be helpful if these outcomes, in the same way that some of the earlier ones were SMART goals, that these ones were too.
Yeah, and I think on this, when looking at it, neither Jody or I were part of the process. So as we look at it, we're trying to understand and honor the work that was done. So there might be ways now with your input and guidance that we can take some of this and maybe tighten it a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see too, like specifically, we complete a facilities plan or a capital plan. Like that's not, it's sort of alluded to here in the last budget, but it's not here. I really like the roles and responsibilities one, that everyone has a job description. That's awesome. And I think there was something about an org chart being
Yes.
formalized.
First two, yeah.
This in the first one, the second one, and the next to last one. So maybe just like rolling it all into, we have a new org chart, everyone has a job description, like that would be awesome. And then the data and the facilities would be great.
To strengthen those,
Yeah,
make them more measurable.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Get rid of the ones that are squishier and nail it down.
All right, anyone else on objective 5? And why don't we move on to our next item, which is discussion and development of FY 2025 budget guidelines and priorities.
Could I ask first about the process from here on out for this document? So it sounded like the plan was to put this out to the public in a not so final form, like before the school committee sees it again. Is that
Yes.
still the?
So the plan is to take all of the wonderful feedback, and you do have access to the Padlets if you like go home tonight and are thinking, oh gee, I should have said that at the meeting. In a non-deliberative personal way, you have the Padlet that you can provide feedback on as well. We're going to take all of this information. We're going to recraft the objectives and the outcomes, or mostly the outcomes, with your suggestion, and that'll be in the draft that we put out to the public in a form that's consumable.
Procedurally, that feels weird to me.
I was gonna just ask,
Yeah.
is it that you want to see it prior
Yeah.
to it going back?
Me, yes, I
Yeah.
think that like, I feel like we've made a lot of comments and feedback, and I just want to make sure that there's no disconnect before it hits the street.
Makes complete sense.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. That was a very thorough presentation and a lot of input. I saw you taking copious notes.
Thank you, everyone, for your input.
So
Yes.
on the budget bit of it, honestly, I think it's great if we have conversation, but my immediate inclination is to hold to see the next draft and to see if it has chunks that are tractable for FY 25, to then think about how our priorities might reflect FY 25. But and that's just my initial thinking, and I'm like not.
I think that makes sense, and that would get us back on schedule.
I know, I was also throwing a bone to the schedule, like.
But if there's anything more brief, that you wanted to discuss on the 2025 budget guidelines and priorities? We do have about 15 minutes.
Me or anyone in general.
Anyone?
I'm interested in hearing people's thoughts of what they want to see. If they're ready, or if they want to see the next draft, they can also not say anything.
Anyone? I guess not. All right.
One thing, David, actually, just to say, I'm not sure it's relevant to the strategic plan, but I do think that somehow we want to reflect on how, if and how we need to talk about the class size thing and how that ends up in our budget
Yeah.
priorities. So, but I'm not sure we need to discuss it now, but that we wanted it there, I think we probably want it there.
So that's certainly one important piece. Then another important one, as we discussed at policy and also tonight, the inclusion policy of life in the school,
Yes.
of trying to create greater socioeconomic equity. There will be some very real costs, financial costs associated with that. And so to the extent that district staff can help us quantify what that looks like, that'll be also very important in crafting the budget guidelines.
But wouldn't the budget guidelines be essentially superseded by the plan, the strategic plan? But why wouldn't the budget guidelines just be, we want to use the budget now to achieve the?
It might,
plan?
it might. but
What
we don't-
other guidelines do we want? I mean, anything that's in the budget guidelines should now be in the strategic plan, and if they're not, we need to adjust the strategic plan, I would think.
Well, I don't think it's an exact match necessarily. So
Well, then
some of-
I would think then there's more work to do in the strategic plan.
But what I mean by that is elements of the strategic plan are not explicitly tied to financial investments. A lot of it certainly is, but some of it around building culture and community connections, there's not always a financial cost to that. So there might be, I think, some gap between.
And I think his point is that a square is a rectangle, even if the rectangle isn't always a square, right? That everything should be within the strategic plan.
No, I agree. It should be. My point, though, is I don't think they necessarily have to be identical. One certainly is going to encompass the totality of the other, but there can be some differences.
Can you give me an example?
Well, meaning building culture, building some of the social emotional components of the strategic plan don't necessarily have direct financial implications.
Then I think that we can't do that. I mean, if there aren't activities that are budgetable behind them, it would seem to me to be not adequately planned for. Unless they're so inexpensive that we don't have to worry about them. I mean, in which case we could just say in the budget guidelines, we need to achieve all of the activities in the strategic plan, and some of them are really cheap, so.
Even one way I think of this is the budget guidelines something that helps us have a common understanding of where we expect there to be costs. So for example, we might say, we're looking for a budget that's going to include the new curriculum for blah, 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 this for this. There'll be like, I'm making up 10 bullets that are the things that we're expecting to see in the budget because they're referenced in the strategic plan. And we might mention another couple of things that are maybe like, just to give an example, whatever happened at the high school this year, how is that going to be righted? Just something that's more topical rather than strategic, like a tactical issue. And that's a way I see us all is it's an opportunity for us to come back together around the things that are clearly going to have budgetary implications and confirm that we all agree on them before they go into the full budget plan. Like, I guess I see it as a reinforcement mechanism as opposed to different from the strategic plan. It's almost like a teasing out of the key budgetary issues in the strategic plan. That's how I see it. So that we all say, yep, okay, it's not a 20-pager.
Preface to the strategic plan.
It's almost more like, it's like the annual, just the budget, like, hey, let's all agree, these are the budget elements that are coming up
That's
next.
fine with me. I guess it seems to me that the strategic plan in my mind now is the chief document that's guiding our work. And the budget guidelines now need to be supportive of the strategic plan.
Mhm.
So if there's daylight, I want to work on the strategic plan.
Yes,
So I hear you that that made sense to me what you said, that the budget guidelines I'm seeing now as a preface that outlines areas of emphasis. For
it's almost like the financial translation of what's written.
Sure, okay, that makes sense to
And
me.
it's almost like, in my mind, in the same way, a couple of years ago, we went to multi-year budget guidelines. the budget guidelines might actually be the exact same 3 years. And it might say in year one, we're expecting this cost. It might actually map out the entire 3 years of the,
That might be,
yes,
that might be a nice way to create milestones, actually.
exactly. It sort of ties to the milestones.
Yeah.
Like in year one, we're buying this curriculum. In year two, we're doing the training. So there better be $1 million for the new curriculum and $50,000 for the training. And, you know, like we need to see those things mapped.
I wonder then if the financial guidelines can explicitly be tied to outcomes or objectives at the very least.
Well, it should be. I'm assuming it's an exact, in my mind, this was an
I think
exact
that's
map to
sort
the
of what's
strategic
here.
plan. So it would be, but that's why I was sort of struggling with the idea that there was only outcomes in year three.
Right, and
Because
previously our financial guidelines were bullets, right? And then there was illustrative expenditures.
yeah,
So I'm wondering if we could change the format of
well, we're
that.
ripping up the entire format.
Sure.
Yeah. That's the.
I'll shut up.
Well, at least that was my vision of it, was we are ripping up the entire format because we have the strategic plan and we need a document that ties very neatly with the strategic plan and reinforces it, but addresses the financial lens through which we see the strategic
That
plan.
makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Thanks.
Andy?
If we're done with that, can I bring this back to your question, Mariah, about when do we talk about class size? So
Yeah.
I believe the plan was that next week's meeting includes a discussion about the budget calendar. This would be an opportunity to talk about that issue, I think, with Linus and with.
What is the budget calendar tie with this class?
Well, I think the idea was to sort of fold this conversation maybe into that, because the school committee last year never made any kind of programmatic decision to save money by increasing class sizes,
Right.
and yet that came about. And so we need to figure out how it came about, and sort of discuss that, and also possibly sort of our whole approach to class size and class size guidelines, and whether that might need to be revised.
I really hope we're not burying that under budget calendar.
Well, we could break it out as a separate agenda item, but this was, the idea was that we could
Burying the lead.
discuss it
Yeah.
there. Yeah. And that Linus would sort of lead that discussion, actually.
I hope we don't put that
Why
under.
not separately talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if we think that's worth doing, then let's do that. Anyway, to answer your question, next week, one way or the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but just to go back to this, just to sort of close the loop on budget guidelines, we're not going to have a draft of the new budget guidelines ready for next week, which is what we had emailed about. And we'll wait until the next draft of the document comes out, and then perhaps we can sit down and highlight the things that we think have the financial impact, and then work from there and ballpark them. So that I don't know, well, do we need to quantify them or do we need to call them out? Are people wanting to know the dollar value, or are people just satisfied knowing that they expect to see? Okay,
I actually think that having some kind of at least broad estimate. So
yeah.
we
Is it
know
7
what-
figures? Is it 6 figures? Right. I agree with the range of dollar amount. Yeah.
Can I ask a very basic question? Maybe I'll just sit with you. How does enrollment and budget, like, I don't know the very basics there. Is it worth just having a separate conversation about that? One-on-one, or does everybody understand like that?
I think, isn't that part of the conversation we're going to have about class size? I think
Okay,
it's-
that's where. it
I
fits
think
under.
fits under that, don't you think? It's a bigger conversation too. Yeah.
All right, so why don't we go ahead and move on to introduction to the governance core.
Look, we're ahead of schedule now, David.
Wow.
Betsy, I told you, I always like to take the time so you can bring us back.
So we've been assigned by Dr. Guillory to read a book, and each of us were paired up with a colleague and assigned 2 chapters. And we are supposed to present on our respective chapters.
We didn't.
Overall is to develop bills and codify a shared understanding of roles to lead and improve the school district. So who had chapters 1 and 2?
Helen and I did.
All right.
We didn't really prepare.
We didn't prepare a presentation, but
Why don't you just at least talk about?
You want to start?
I think we need.
I
a school
repeated
committee
himself many
curriculum. With some standards-based assessments.
It is very repetitive, I agree, but part of that's.
really get his point in, yeah.
Yes, I need that.
Initiatitis was an important.
I
point he
love
put in
that.
there.
I love
Yeah,
that
like
expression.
word.
I actually marked that one.
Look at it.
All right, Helen and Natalia.
All right, go right ahead.
Want to start, Helen? or Ash?
However you want.
All right, I mean, so the first chapter is really setting up what he's gonna talk about, this idea of a moral imperative, which, and, what is, did everybody read the introduction, by the way? Okay, so we'll also do introduction. So the introduction has some interesting points around, I would say, that the difference between politics and governance. Politics being that we're all elected, so when we run a campaign, we have like an initiative that we want to go for, but that governance is really about how we work together, how do we collaborate, and that people who join boards need to switch very quickly from a political campaign modality to a governance that requires, it's not about the individual, it's not about short term, it's not about, so then he spends a lot of time defining governance and governance mindset and also coherence. And I think it was in the introduction where it talks a little bit about unity and really thinking about how we work in a unified fashion.
Working as a team.
Working as a team. And the organizing principle, they use this term, the moral imperative. Basically, we all agree on and I think it matches with our sort of setting our core values, vision, and mission. He sort of dismisses what, he says visions don't really matter, but this moral imperative does. But I think we've spent a lot of time. So agreeing that like, what is the purpose of school, like to have equitable, achievements, to think about the kids, having a governance mindset means always keeping the boards focused on the children, watching the budget, keeping focus on the long-term goals of the organization, building and maintaining a strong governance infrastructure. But basically it's, I feel like the first chapter was giving us some guidelines around how do we behave with each other. I think it was written in a context of kind of a more combative type, so things like reserve judgment, listen, empathetically, stay focused on content. So I feel like we do seem to have a governance mindset. At our current, we are not a collection of individual voices, but a team that we recognize that we can only move forward, if we kind of work together. Helen, am I interpreting it?
No, I think
the
you're
same way
doing a
you
good job. I think one thing that stood out for me is governance is not just passing policies, it's what boards and superintendents do together and how they do it. So that sort of stood out to me a bit.
I know a lot of.
So what he says is the traditional definition of board responsibility seems designed to inhibit or constrain the board's scope of leadership. But governance is not just passive policies, it's what the boards and superintendents do together. So yes, it's important to have policies, but it's how we work together is what moves the system forward.
You mean like our civility?
Well, part of it is civility, part of it is sort of an understanding that, that the superintendent understands where we are and that we understand where he is. Is the way I interpret it.
Remember the Venn diagram in our chapter are the same thing.
Yeah, they repeat.
I think it's probably repeats, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the chapter 2 was really about what makes the trustee governance mindset. So it's like what makes and it says that, you need to be a systems thinker, recognize that, you can't have a priority of like, I only care about English language learning, because if you focus on that, you might miss that, so systems, like taking a step back and thinking.
And not, if I could,
Yeah.
not being single focused on one issue, because that sort of then really doesn't allow you to hear some of the other stuff that happens or that needs to happen, because everything is only seen through one lens, is the way I saw it.
Yeah, then the second, he had 4. He had systems thinking, strategic focus, deep learning, and manner. And it was 2. The strategic focus was, yes.
That's the systems thinking, right?
Systems thinking
Oh, it's
is
different.
different from
Yeah.
strategic focus,
Yeah.
which now I do not actually remember what the difference was. Deep learning was kind of a commitment to, basically the future of, the competencies that we might have. And then the manner, spent quite a bit of time about how we, are civil with each other. So those were and listening carefully to each other. And that makes for a good governance mindset.
There was something in here, and now I can't find it, about how, sometimes making decisions have consequences that unintended.
I think that was the systems thinking part.
Was that the
That
systems
it's
thinking
a
part?
system, it's not individual, like one decision could have other consequences, and we need to sort of think about it as a system.
Well, in terms of the synopsis, but again, the notion here, and I think David shared a communication with you. The notion here is for you all to share out sort of a broad, high level understanding or your engagement with the chapter, and over the course of the year, and when we get to the spring workshop, we'll do a check-in on this. But this notion is, how do we work together? So I think this notion of building a shared understanding, using this workshop as an understanding, as an opportunity to understand more deeply, and this notion of not bringing our sort of pet projects or single areas of foci focus to the table, but how do we keep truly looking at this from the systems level or the district level? And I think that piece becomes very important. Like, there are times when we can become myopic about a particular thing that's important to us, and we sometimes may lose sight of the broader district work there. So.
One quote I liked from that chapter 2 is, it was the bit about I read the whole
You
thing.
read the whole thing?
How are you gonna know the last, what the last?
There's a problem.
Andy and I both read the whole thing. How are we gonna report on 7 and 8? Where are we reporting on the last chapter? It's not a hard read, and it was, as you say, semi-repetitive. But anyway, I liked it. This spoke to my soul, this book. Anyways, I know no one else I like. Thank you, Linus, for picking out this book. Was the thing about the firefighters, and it says, note to superintendent. Oh, see, it was your chapter. You don't even know what I'm talking about.
Maybe I did.
Note to superintendents: if you put a fire hose in the hands of a trustee,
yes.
they will get out of the helicopter and fight the fire. And I
Yeah.
just thought to myself, it's great because it's a collaboration on making sure that not only are we doing what we're supposed to, but other people are asking us to do what we're supposed to do too. So, because all of us volunteered to essentially put our shoulder to the wheel, right? And so, but we can put it in they talked about this anecdote of being in the helicopter planning the
Right.
strategy, or down on the ground fighting the fire with the hose. And
Right.
so where do you want us? So I liked it.
All right, why don't we go to chapters 3 and 4? Who had chapters 3 and 4?
Val and I did.
Your
And
remote members did. And we did them separately because we're in separate states. So
with separate time zones. So
All right,
I'm doing
chapter three.
I'm doing chapter 3 and Val's doing chapter 4. Chapter 3 was about the superintendent's governance mindset. And they did note that it is possible to have sustainable long-term success. So it is possible to have a superintendent who can be here for 10, 15, even 20 years, even in this day and age. And they gave examples of 5 superintendents who have done just that and have done really well. So it is out there. There's proof that we can do it. And they made some suggestions. There were 3 things they talked about: purposeful board with superintendent engagement, so that we are focused and purposeful, that we have, again, that shared moral imperative, and that we have a collaborative, trust-based governance culture. They talked a lot about trust and respect. There should be no surprises. Things should not come up for the first time at the meetings. That should be vetted probably beforehand so people can be prepared, or we could talk through what the issues might be. They said that trust comes from the belief that the superintendent will do the right thing for the right reasons, and that boards believe that the honesty, competency, and moral purpose of the superintendent is paramount to the success of the committee, which they often called the board. They called us trustees as well, as you know, if you read it. I read the whole book as well. It did speak to me as well. And then again, they repeat over and over, I think, throughout the book, the supporting this trustee governance mindset, again, systems thinking at the district level, strategic focus versus tactical. Tactical is the operations. So it's not thinking about the operations, it's thinking about the strategies, the big picture, the what, not the how, as we talk about. Deep learning, I interpret it to mean that we do the work to learn, that we dig into the issues, that we study them, that we make the effort and understand the data. And that manner is your public behavior. Again, we show by our example, as does the superintendent, about how we behave, how we expect the public to behave. But we are always wearing a school committee hat, even when we are at the grocery store. And so we're elected officials. We have to conduct ourselves as such. That was pretty much it for chapter 3.
So my chapter, I think, is even shorter, but it's also very Canadian. It's on welcoming what they call new trustees. And so I found this interesting, especially in the context of elected officials. And again, there's repeat of that shifting of what Natalia said from the politics to the governance. And regardless of what somebody ran on or didn't run on, that when you add a new member, it's like building an entirely new organization in terms of the board, and that there are sort of very specific things to welcome them, like a meeting with the chair and the superintendent, site visits to all the schools, things of that nature. They lay out all of them, individual board members, all of us reaching out to a new person, as well as having some discussions, but also on the new member side, to putting aside perhaps an issue that they ran on for that greater collective systems good, and what their obligations as a member would be in those first 100 days. So that was that chapter. I have to say I struggled a little bit with the Canadian concepts in it, because I think that all of us certainly run on issues we care about, and of course we care about the broad, but I think that just as humans, it's hard for us sometimes to not care about something a little bit more than something else. And I think that that's just human. So I'm just acknowledging that as I read it.
Why was that Canadian? I remember one of the people was Canadian, but was that a Canadian thing? You weren't allowed to talk about your own issues?
Well, I think it's the educational system, right? Like it's a different, we're hyper local in our educational system, I think, than the way that school boards in Canada are thought of. But that was just.
Oh, but even some places in the States have county boards as opposed to individual districts, which could be, tens of thousands of kids.
All right, any questions for Suzanne and Val, or just further thoughts on the material covered in their chapters? Mariah?
I thought chapter 4 about the one that Val was just talking about was really interesting. I thought we do a lot of those things, but maybe not in like a checklist format. And maybe we should really have like a checklist of induction for, and I know that like there's the mentoring practice and whatever, but some of the things like, and I think Andy's going to talk about this later in our section 2 of like, how does the board operate? Like, I just think there could be a little bit more of, it sort of feels like a fire hose. And so a little bit more of a transition that's a little more structured, I think would actually be very beneficial. And also for other people who are trying to understand how the board works, whether they don't, even if they don't want to join, just sort of some of the basic practices. But I think Andy's going
And that all can go in our governance handbook.
Exactly. But
We
wait till
don't have a handbook?
wait till we get to chapter 8. We don't want to give away all of our secrets. Andy just.
The overachievers are up next.
It's amazing, isn't it, Val? These
Let's
just
just find someone else.
I don't want to
who's an
show you our
overachiever.
handout, but I'll just say it's a thing of beauty. We
Ask
follow the instructions.
each of them how many AP courses they took. It's probably more than the rest of us combined.
All right, so why don't we go to 5 and 6? So Stephen and I were assigned chapters 5 and 6. I gave you a handout which basically provides an outline form.
There's
for chapters 5 and 6.
Here we go.
So chapter,
This is a serious handout.
so chapter 5 essentially talks about how to govern with coherence.
Oh, my God.
Early on, it says that that the goal is to present a unified board, not a uniform board. where all three of curriculum instruction, management administration, and governance are aligned in partnership. So I think that goes back to a little bit of what Natalie and Helen were addressing, where it's sort of how the whole functions better when all the parts are engaged jointly and not in a competitive manner or separately in silos. Now, unified boards with strong leadership exhibit 4 attributes: focused direction with unity of purpose, collaborative culture with mutual trust, accountability linked to external performance measures, and deepened learning. Most of the discussion among those 4 attributes was centered around focused direction with unity of purpose and the challenges that arise in achieving unity of purpose. Typical challenges include balancing an individual's core values with the board's unified purpose. So that speaks to what Val was just addressing. Then another major category is micromanagement. And perhaps Dr. Guillory was trying to send Stephen and I a subliminal message there in the science chapter. There was a lot of micromanagement. So it said that micromanagement mostly occurs in private. So we don't always see it in public settings, but there will be smaller meetings with maybe 1 or 2 school committee members who are maybe inappropriately pushing in a certain direction or advocating for something in particular. That can be difficult on a superintendent because likely if 1 or 2 members are doing it, maybe almost all of them are, and pointing in
Or doing it in
directions.
different ways.
Right. Another challenge is, again, intrusion into the administrative or instruction roles. Now, sometimes there can be a misinterpretation there where that's actually not the intent at all. But nevertheless, because we are elected officials townwide, if we say something, even if we only mean it as a suggestion, it might be interpreted as a mandate. And so we need to be mindful of that. Also, sometimes we might step out of our lanes because we're frustrated with staff. And that doesn't just mean the superintendent or deputy superintendent, but it can be an educator, a coordinator, whoever it might be. We occasionally might stray into administrative or instruction roles because we don't like how something is transpired. Occasionally, we might exit our lane because of a personal expertise. So some examples that the author provides are around attorneys, accountants, people with financial expertise, HR was another category, and that we feel, well, this is my work, so I understand it, so this is how it should be done. And we shouldn't do that.
Actually, I thought the chapter was a little ambivalent on that. It says under expertise that it depends.
Yeah.
That's the one time that I read that it seemed to it was a bit of a sop to the idea that if you come in with pre-existing expertise or a pet issue, perhaps there were some situations in which it was okay for you to do a little extra work or advocacy.
I interpreted it as be extremely careful.
Yeah, this book is just like behave yourself.
Yeah.
If you have real expertise in some area, okay, you could do a little extra there. But otherwise, you're a team player. Just subsume yourself to the organization and all other things.
But even there, I think it was more about being a team player. So if the district and the broader team, and remember that Venn diagram that has pretty much the curriculum instructional part, the superintendent part, the school board part, if everybody agrees that because of your expertise, you're going to draft X policy,
Right.
and that's going to be your role, that's one thing. But it's another if you utilize your personal expertise to step on someone else's toes who has that specific role. Then also, as I think Val mentioned and some others, there's the issue of feeling that we need to provide certain favors to a constituent, and we might inappropriately ask the superintendent to take some step to help a friend or a neighbor or whatever it might be. Also, there was mention that this type of overstepping is likelier to occur where we do not have specific protocols on governance. We don't currently have such protocols, so that's something that we may want to develop. But apparently Andy has something that he's shared with us.
Well, except for communication norms. That's the one area that we
Yes,
have tried to develop
communication norms. As others addressed, there was discussion about the single agenda, one purpose type of school board member, and to avoid that. There's also the tension between some individual members might feel that if they compromise, they're selling out. Some might feel that if they're going along with the majority, that they're just rubber stamping. There are confidentiality issues that we need to be mindful of to legally breach personnel information, for instance. Some of us might feel that in order to
They
be a
read
leader-
that loose lips. I like that.
Some of us feel that we might need to be more of a leader, assert ourselves more versus merely being a follower. So those are all dynamics that we wrestle with individually. There is some advice to accept the will of the majority, not to take split votes personally, that having a divided vote can actually sometimes be the sign of more thoughtful discussion, because in having those arguments in a respectful, civil manner, you actually delve deeper into the underlying substance. And ultimately, we likely have a shared outcome in mind. It's just we have different avenues for how to get there. Now getting to collaborative culture with mutual trust. Says that trust is an outcome, not a precondition, that encompasses respect and understanding, not necessarily agreement. And here, the author seems to love John McCain, specifically cited John McCain as an example of this, that even if you didn't agree with him, he was respectful, he'd listen, hear you out, and there's value in that. So
I thought it was about Kennedy, McCain describing Kennedy.
maybe it was,
Or not McCain, John, it was McCain
McCain talking about Ted Kennedy.
describing the.
McCain describing Kennedy.
McCain's trying to Ted Kennedy.
That's what I thought.
That was
Okay.
the best ally.
I was like, hold on, this was about Kennedy reaching across the aisle.
The two of them would talk, and that's an example of people from seemingly opposite camps, but there was mutual respect, and we should.
I think they're in the same camp.
Yeah, right. Seriously.
Oh, I'm dead.
Huh?
Sorry.
Sure, no.
All right, Stephen, you want to handle
Oh, sure.
chapter 6?
It was a pretty short chapter. It was the, sorry, it was the idea was behave yourself. And you should do it formally. That there, the idea was that there should have protocols, norms, and what's the third one? There's one other form.
Guidelines for the meetings
And
themselves.
guidelines, and he has a bunch of examples for doing so. You can continue with the
Sure,
specifics.
so for the meeting guidelines, there were very specific recommendations. Keep the focus on the best interests of students while working with parents, community, and staff. Stay focused on goals. This has been a big one with Andy in particular. So when we have docket preview,
Are you calling him out or calling him in?
calling him out in a good way.
Oh, okay.
So when we have docket preview, Andy's always on point about why do we have this agenda item? How does this advance our discussion on goals? And that's a very good mindset to have. So let's all try to model that. Then also working toward the future. I think we already do that pretty well. Respecting everyone. I think we do that. Communicating openly. I think we do that. Providing helpful feedback. I believe we do that. That one can be a little tricky though, because that gets back to the maybe overstepping the lane. And that's where sometimes misunderstandings can occur. So I think being careful about saying, this is a suggestion, it's not a mandate, I'm not ordering you, don't interpret it that way, but just
The
something to
key
think
thing
about.
here is he says you gotta write this stuff down, how you behave. You should collaboratively
Yes,
write
have
it down.
protocols basically to spell all this out. Also for
Put it on
meeting
the shelf
guidelines,
afterwards, yeah.
deliberate the facts of the situation, not the personalities involved. I think we do that. Offer, now this one I find a little discordant. Offering ideas and resources. So on the one hand, we're told, don't step on anyone's toes, that's the staff's job. But on the other, it's saying offer ideas and resources.
I think the difference there is between telling someone how to do it or saying these things are done in other places. You know, we can think about it.
Yes.
There's a difference in the tone and the quality of the offering.
And
Both can be seen as offering. But if you're telling somebody how, you know, I expect you to do it like this, that's sort of what I see as the difference.
There's encouragement to make remarks succinct, to seek common ground,
Say that again?
make remarks succinct, to seek common ground, support the ultimate decision of the board, and to respect schedules, which I think we do a really good job of now. I remember my early school committee years, those meetings were long, 1 a.m. even.
I don't know what long is.
Well, I'm really glad we don't know what long it is because that's no way to run a meeting.
Oh, God.
And in terms
John
of effective
Hopkins
protocols,
used to get up and walk out at 11 o'clock.
I believe
Didn't
it.
matter what it was, he would get up.
getting to what Stephen was talking about, the importance of having written protocols to facilitate meaningful discussion so that you always have something to refer to so you can have that meaningful discussion. It resolves problems before they occur. If you have written protocols, you know what the expectations are, you're less likely to run into trouble. Also for training new members, as discussed earlier, and to create benchmarks for self-evaluation. Also, just the mere process of writing protocols helps lead to discussions that will likely or lead to meaningful implementation. The author describes situations where you might have something on paper that sounds nice, but you don't really follow it. And I think that actually is an area where we can improve. We actually have a lot of policies, we do, but do we really follow them? And this is not just a criticism for us, I must say, but there are many instances where it appears that staff maybe has gone their own direction and maybe very valid reasons for doing so, but where that happens, we should be revisiting those policies to keep them in alignment. Also, just another thought I have from reading these chapters, it talks a lot, again, about not micromanaging, not going into what's under the superintendent's control. But by the same token, it did say that we have certain powers that we should not necessarily abdicate. And among those are policy. So sometimes there can be occasions where maybe staff is actually pushing us to rubber stamp something they want. And that's actually our domain. So of course we want to be very respectful of staff because they're the experts. They're the ones who can provide us with the right input and give us the right information. But it's really our decision, not the reverse. And we should remember that.
Just like you were saying, revisit the policies, the other alternative may be go back to the staff to re-educate or to revisit what the policy is. And if there's an issue between the resources or the staffing and how to implement the policy. Like it's not just changing the policy to match the practice, it's seeing how the practice may need to be modified, but what is impeding, if anything, the practice being modified.
Yes.
Yeah, that's currently going on with a couple of important policies, right?
Yeah.
We do this all the time.
All right, so any further questions? Oh, sorry, we have got 7 and 8 to go to.
How could you forget 7 and 8? Of course we did this.
Put this on.
And Betsy printed it out in color because.
There's some super achievers here.
And then you put your names at the top.
Yeah, there's an extra copy.
Who was it? Oh, and did you-
So can we wait for Betsy to get it on screen so that Susan
Oh, we can put
Do
it
you
up.
want me to do 7 and you do 8?
or we can just both talk. 8 is.
Can't talk
you
We can't
without your
both talk at the
size.
same time.
Oh.
We could, we wrote this together
Okay.
in Google Docs at the same time. It was like when people play piano and there's like 4 hands. Do, 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 do.
Ellen and I texted, have you read? Not yet.
I will get
Yes, we get a D, they get an A plus, they get an A.
All right. It's on screen
You
there.
want to read and then I'll just chime in if there's anything I care about,
Sure.
about adding to.
So much of this is repetitive, but in a way that I think the book was maybe building toward these couple of chapters. So chapter 7 was on the job of governance, and really that image there is sort of the chapter. So basically our job is to focus, well, our job consists of those responsibilities that only the board can carry out, right? And those 5 are setting strategic direction, directing and improving policy, stewardship and support, oversight and accountability. All of these are connected. I confess I don't quite understand what each arrow means, like the nature of that connection, but such it is. And permeating everything is community leadership. So
The way I saw the arrows was you have to set the direction and then your policies have to support the strategy. And then you have to support the staff to enact those policies. And then you have to check to make sure that those policies have, that those things have happened.
so these are behaviors that follow logically from the previous.
Correct,
Yes,
exactly. And
yes,
then you
exactly.
revisit it and you make sure your strategy, exactly. So it's a virtuous circle. I
All the while making sure the community is okay.
Exactly.
You want to talk about the highlights and takeaways?
Sure. So in the middle of this, there was some suggestions from the authors, and the first one was about not just setting the strategic direction, but sustaining it. And it was this question of, which I think we heard about from lots of what everyone else basically said, which is you have to keep paying attention and make sure that the systems are working in the way that you intend them to, and you focus on the goals and don't get distracted by stuff. And then connecting it with these measurable goals, success indicators, which is what we were doing tonight. And they specifically reflected on how challenging it is in this current moment in time when technology is changing so quickly, society is changing so quickly in ways they never have before, and how it's a particularly complicated job now. They said that it's easy to get sort of bogged down in the administrative portions of being on the board, but don't get, and I think that's sort of what you're referring to, David, a minute ago about Andy always saying, how does this meet our goals? And so don't get bogged down on administrative approvals and such. And then the big things that they said to focus on were financial health and program plans and frameworks. So, they mentioned like, what's your food services plan? What's your transportation plan? What's your facility plan? Those were interesting, and I reflected that we didn't have a food services plan that I know of. We don't have a facilities plan, although we've wanted one and been trying to get one. We don't have a
Well,
transportation.
we do have one. It's old.
Sure, it's old. It's really old, right? It's 12
It's
years,
te-
10
yeah.
years old at this
Yeah.
point. Let's say a few things have happened between that and
Yes.
now.
Well, just as we had a strategic plan that for 3 or 4 years, we really stuck to.
Yeah.
And things moved.
Yeah.
And then I think there was a new superintendent came in, and then all sorts of things happened.
And then our takeaway 3 is sort of a combination of stewardship and oversight. So it's really supporting the positive culture, but also holding the district accountable. And they said that sometimes that can feel tricky, and but if you live to your governance behavior, if you really are sort of like acting according to the role, then actually those two things aren't in tension. And that you really need to have data to be able to do that, and that it's really valuable to make sure which data you care about so that people aren't spending their time collecting data that's not actually core to what you need to know.
That last sentence there I'm not sure that was in the book. I think that was us.
That was you, but I agree with it, and I think they would have agreed with it too. I didn't take it out when you wrote it, and I think they would have agreed with it too, because this was specific to us. And then this was our editorial sentence that Andy wrote and I agreed with. And then leading by example, by interacting with the community, which we were talking about earlier today about our community engagement plan, but also understanding, like, they made really clear that as a strategic thinker trustee, you're not going to know every little detail of every program, but you should understand the big goals of the district and sort of like what they're meant to achieve. And they said, if you can in your conversations focus on those, the community will start to build a sense of trust that there is a big picture direction setting and strategic thinking.
Okay, the final chapter was on tools that can help us govern better. So the 4 tools the authors list are: 1, discussion meetings like this one, having a governance handbook. So it might be worth discussing whether we need a standalone governance handbook for ourselves. Board self-evaluation, and neither Mariah nor I thought that we did this explicitly. I don't think we do. And finally, continuing education, which we kind of do, both for internal governance as well as deeper learning. For me, the highlight was this notion of a governance handbook, which actually had not occurred to me until I read about it here. But it does, to me, seem like a pretty good idea. The suggested parts of such a handbook would be: 1, a description of our moral imperative and our unity of purpose. Sounds like the preamble to the US Constitution. A description of our role and the superintendent's roles and responsibilities. A description of our governance culture. A list of protocols that we've adopted, and a list of strategic goals that we've adopted. I think many of these things they exist, they're just in scattered locations. I think there's some policies that bear on the school committee. We have a short document with our norms and things like that, but it might be worth pulling together in one place. Just, it would be concise. It would just be, a few pages that could sit on somebody's desk. And there have been times of stress for a school committee where I felt like it would have been helpful to just to have some things written down that sort of govern how we run our meetings and how we interact with the community, and how we interact with staff.
I really like it because I feel like there's the communications norms you said, then there's like those couple of policies that govern behavior in meetings and how we interact with people, and having it instead of within the really big policy handbook, having it as you say, like a, you know, a 4-page handout would be really nice and really help everyone understand how we plan to present ourselves as a group and how we expect to receive people. And I really like it.
And I think it would take the burden off the chair to some extent to having to make lots of, you know, sensitive decisions on the fly.
And since Andy has volunteered to do the handbook, I'm especially supportive.
I second it.
He did. I know.
But with editing from the group.
Elliot, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna jump in on this, and maybe it relates to both of your chapters, and being the newest person, like, I think I've gone to Helen sometimes and been like, I don't actually know what our role is. Like, when we get these emails about the heat, like in the classrooms, I was like, okay, so what is my role? Why are they emailing me about heat in the classroom? Like, or about, you know, like sometimes I'm just kind of confused. And if there was that it's not our role, or it is a role to think about the buildings, but for this heat emergency, it really should be going to the staff. Like maybe even in our emails, like to be able to say, thanks, I'm looping in, you know, like it seems like it would be micromanaging. Like this is something where I've kind of struggled with, why are they writing to school committee about this topic? And then sometimes it's like, actually, they should be, and I don't mean to underplay heat. I actually, as a public health person, I cared a lot about the heat, and maybe that's why it caused me some anxiety, because I was like, oh no, we have to do something about the heat. Like maybe not from a school committee perspective, it was more the expertise perspective. So I think it would be helpful. I don't think this book answered those questions for me. Like, what is our actual role, other than saying don't micromanage, think about policy, but which policies and what kind of high level? Like, I feel like I still came out of it being like, okay, I don't quite, well, I only read the first 2 chapters, so maybe I should.
That's something that protocols could respond to.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
And our communications norms actually
That's
do
right.
specifically address what you do when you get an email and you don't know what to do with it. And my question today, actually, to Betsy, and it wasn't about the specific email we received, it was really more about the broader practice of, and I recalled that Robin in the past I think would often forward those emails that were specifically about, like, you know, my door isn't working, but it was, or whatever it was, you know, like a specific thing, or but I don't know that that's ever been codified into some of these activities. And if we had it all in one place, you might be like, okay, this is how I'm supposed to behave.
Right.
I think the challenge though, and we could still codify it, some of these fit into multiple categories. So with your heat example, yes, that's a facilities issue and we have a facilities person, but it's also potentially a policy issue, which we would have some say in. And when it's collective bargaining,
But then it's a
season, it's also a
financial
bargaining issue, financial issue. So there are certain categories of emails where there is school committee relevance, as well as a more direct operational.
I don't think the idea is to spell out what we do in every situation, is just to make sure that we're all looking at things sort of from the same standpoint and with the same intuitions.
Well, and also, like, if we had a governance document that says, you know, you can share this email with the staff, but it's not intended as a directive necessarily, right? It's like an informational sharing, like I received this email, as opposed to go look in classroom 25 of wherever because I'm school committee and I'm telling you to, right? That's not the intent of that's not how they should take those emails.
Andy, I want to offer to contribute to helping you with number 3, the governance culture, if you want any help.
So thanks.
So
What
one
are
of
the
the,
existing documents that need to be reviewed?
I would say the governance section of the policy handbook, because a fair amount of this actually is covered in there, but it's really scattered and hasn't been updated in a long time.
And then we have school
The
committee
norms.
The communication norms, which I can share the document
Is it
with you.
just communication norm?
I think there were other norms too that we did. Maybe it
That was when
before you were here.
Dimitri ran that conversation. Yeah, and we did have, I think it was committee norms. Didn't we have committee norms
I
and
think
behavior?
so.
Yes,
I
we
think
did.
so.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Yeah,
we
you did, right? And that was a nice document. I forgot about that. But also,
Yeah.
it's kind of nice that we haven't actually needed to rely on it.
No, but I mean, it's something that in the past, we've gone over every summer, you know, after new people are elected in, just to sort of refresh our minds about committee norms.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a long
Why are you
time.
looking at me when you say
Let's see, you must have that somewhere.
Are
in
you
Robin's
feeling
file.
guilty?
Okay.
Suzanne has her hand up.
Suzanne?
Yeah, I was just putting a plug in for some kind of a handbook on governance, because I think they said somewhere in the book, every time a new member comes on, you have a new committee.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
It gives them a base. I mean, they certainly need a mentor still, but it gives you a
Yeah,
base.
no, but it's more than that. And it actually takes almost a full year to really kind of figure some of this out. Sometimes it takes more than that, but it would be helpful, I think.
I also thought what you were saying, Suzanne, about that section was very, I mean, I don't think it's been as acute recently, but this question of like the board is new and someone may have been on the board it was a very competitive race and they had a lot of connections and this new person's coming in. And so how do you like bridging that moment in time? Again, it hasn't been acute recently, but that doesn't mean it, wouldn't be acute.
I think that speaks to the commentary about trust and about how you build trust over time.
Yeah.
And so I personally had that experience. When I first got on school committee, it was a very contested race.
Yeah.
There were initially 8 candidates for 3 spots, and it was 6 candidates for 3 spots. Several members on the board at the time did not want me elected, but I got elected. But I will say, to their credit, right away, they were very welcoming and they were able to put the past aside. And so I would hope that we would be capable of doing that in the future. I think we would.
Yeah.
But it's also the McCain-Kennedy and just be nice to others, be civil. And
Be nice in the sandbox.
Right, but I think it
you know?
also helps people, it gives them tools and strategies with which to rely so that they don't have to be afraid that other people aren't going to use them, and it helps them already with how the tools they need to succeed. So it's a common understanding, right? Of how to
There's
behave.
some piece about what I learned in kindergarten
Yeah.
that really applies,
Oh,
you know?
Nice.
Everything I need to know, I learned.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think
Well,
it's-
I don't think we can require that they read this book if you're new, but I think it would be helpful to them. Like you said, David, if it was a contested race and there's some feelings one way or the other, of whether you're on the right side or the wrong side, I think it's helpful to realize that that's something that you have to go through as a new member. And, you can figure this out, but it's not unique to the individual. It happens to almost everybody who comes on board with some kind of support. How do you stay true to the board and still stay true to some of your values? I think it's helpful to know that that's a thing you have to go through and figure out.
anyone else have anything further on this particular point? So I want to go back to the issue about directives, because I think that's the one that's most.
Did we confirm that Andy's working on the draft of this? I just want to make sure that was locked down. Okay.
The part about directives, because
Let the record show. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
because the part about directives to me is a bit tricky, because it basically says at one point, if you don't like the direction staff is going in, here's the exact language.
Where are you on your bullet of?
Chapter 5, point number 3, accountability linked to external performance measures.
I see.
B, if a board disagrees with staff recommendations or conduct, it should take corrective actions with the superintendent. That sounds really extreme. And so to me, I think I want to see something well short of that. But that could also be construed as directives if you're making suggestions about how to perhaps alter course in a way that would be collaborative for the betterment of the whole. So for me, that's where there's a little bit of tension, because there's all this discussion about stay in your lane, but then when it talks about dissatisfaction with how others are.
Page that's on in the book.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because I don't remember reading this.
The exact page, I'm not sure, but it's definitely in chapter 5 somewhere.
What was that under? Accountability?
Yes.
Dr. Guillory, are we taking away from this the lessons that you were hoping we would take away? Is there anything that you want to emphasize that we haven't spoken much of?
So when you asked your question earlier, I said, I think you're a little premature in asking how do we do at this juncture. But now I think at this part, this notion of first modeling what we expect to happen in the organization.
Yeah.
And I think that starts with the leadership, which starts with the governance structure. So this notion of engaging in some form of professional development in a meaningful way, and not being superficial or callous and, well, these are the sort of the annual types of things, but how do we engage in new learning? So I think this book was sort of, a toe in the water in terms of doing that. And so as I think as Natalia pointed out, well, this didn't answer all of my questions on how to be an effective committee member as such. And so this isn't meant to be the all-inclusive guide to being the best committee member, but it's one of how do I start this journey? And even if I've been on the committee for a long time, how I can still engage in learning as well. And I think that's the general structure here. I think the conversation that naturally ensued a little bit later in the process is what I was hoping that you'd get to. Those of you that followed the instructions and prepared materials that would allow or engage in that process, I think more naturally. So I think this is exactly what I was hoping for. Again, because when a situation arises, there's going to be that, well, let me think about this. How are we thinking about this collectively as a committee versus, well, this is what I think, this is what I'm going to do in this particular case. And it's a balancing act. But it's this notion of I now have a reference tool that I can go back and explore this on. I can pick up the phone and say, hey, I have this question about this. I need help processing this. And so this notion of assuming good intentions versus assuming fault or something was wrong. And so I think that's the collaborative journey. And it's, again, how do we work together as both a committee and a superintendent, or a committee and leadership team in running the organization and improving it, because again, that's what this is all about. So that's what I was hoping that would come out of this. And I think you all met the mark on doing that. So thank you for your engagement in it.
I really did. I mean, I don't know if Andy agrees with me or Suzanne. Well, maybe Suzanne does too, but if you didn't read the whole book, I actually thought it was really interesting, and it was a little bit repetitive, but that makes it easier to read when there's some sections, and there's some anecdotes in there, like about the superintendents. I thought that was really interesting. There was a couple of different sections that I thought were just really nice stories that helped illustrate the concept. So I thought it was pretty well done. And it's not a hard read, like it, because it is kind of repetitive. It's not like they're stretching you anywhere. So, but I really liked, I think what you said, Linus, just now about modeling leadership and modeling who you want everyone in the organization to be, whether it's respectful, always learning, like all of those things. It was a great opportunity to think about, not only do I think those things are important, but I should be actually living them in my daily life. And so how am I going to, respond to Facebook comments with my best self forward, or on the committee, or whatever it is, right? Like I'm wearing a different hat, and I need to make sure that that's always reflected in the practices I have, and even beyond what I think is good, but really take myself to that next level. So I liked it. It was a self-accountability measure.
I did too. Phone's also a respected scholar of professional learning communities too. That's where I had encountered him previously, other than his educational governance work. So I don't know who David Scanlon was, but I like this guy.
Good recommendation.
I'm thankful for your participation and engagement in it as well. So
a somewhat related question, since one of our goals around engaging in sort of professional development with equity amongst ourselves is for this year. Do you have a recommendation for us in terms of what we should be reading on equity? Or maybe Claire will, or.
Yeah, there are a number of things, and the leadership team is actually participating in the Mass Ready work this year. And the district is actually going to be doing, we've signed up to do some work with Lee Title and Darnisa Amante Jackson. So I think it may be productive to engage in some of that learning. And for those that are going to the joint conference in November, Lee and Darnisa are going to be leading one of the big sessions there for the group as well. So there's certainly some recommendations that we can make.
One of the things that I think I would find really valuable is not necessarily a book that talks about these issues from the instructional level, but a book that talks about it from the governance level,
governance
right?
level.
Like, so, because I think it's very easy for us to all of a sudden be down in the weeds of, not the weeds, but I guess from our perspective, the weeds of the detailed work, and that's, and if we're gonna think about it at the strategic institutional level, how can we get something that will help us be strategic thinkers?
And I think that's applicable in a variety of areas, even beyond equity.
Mhm.
But something else I've wondered, to what extent would it be beneficial for us as a body to read books on a whole variety of subjects that we confront? Capital planning.
I
It's
can't
a major
read.
issue.
Can we do presentations? Honestly, I think I can't read. I think I'm dyslexic. I cannot read. I did watch an hour presentation of the governance corp. So if there's a way to also do oral processing, like
Well, there would be discussions like this too, but I think
Discussions are-
that
I'm gonna
we
connect.
probably do want to explore reading books on every major topic that we confront, because we vote on really important issues that we don't necessarily always know about. And to the extent that we can put ourselves in a better position to have informed votes by having the requisite background knowledge to really understand what we're grappling with.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wants managerial accounting.
Yes.
Yes. I wasn't kidding.
Part of it you learn as you go along in the years. I mean, I never knew what a spreadsheet, I mean, I knew a spreadsheet, you know, it was
Yeah.
like, you know, and as you go through year by year, you learn these things. you
Yeah,
know,
but we were
it
talking
doesn't
about
mean-
year zero. How do we give ourselves a running
Yeah,
head start,
Yeah.
right?
no, it's true.
I'll just say one area that I would love to, as a subject for one of these, is governance ideas around equity specifically. I have talked with community members around governance structures relating to equity, whether it's after I said I wanted to see the expansion of the Office of Educational Equity, I heard from people who were really happy to hear me say that, people who were really pissed off at me for saying that. People who were pissed off just because they didn't like equity, but people who were pissed off because they thought centralization wasn't the solution, that there were decentralized strategies that might be more successful. And I realized that I didn't know enough either. I didn't know what the best practices were for governance relating to equity on a district level. But I was convinced that the two-person office just ran the risk of burning more people out. So, but I didn't know what were good practices relating to alternatives, whether it was better to decentralize, put people at the school level, have them reported to an Office of Educational Equity, have them be under OTL, have there be an equity person there, have there be an expanded OEE. I don't know enough cases. So, and given, I think mostly unanimous interest in equity at the school committee right now, I think there'd be a lot of interest in better understanding governance strategies related to equity.
That's what I just said too.
Great. I think you're hearing that we would like homework. We'd actually appreciate it so that we can be well versed on topical issues.
I wanted governance related to equity like 3 minutes ago.
You know where I am.
You sound- you-
Didn't I? I said it, right?
You say it so
What did you say about
compellingly.
listening?
I start to think a thought and then something just blips off.
It happens to all of
It
us.
does, absolutely.
It does.
Nice of you guys.
Especially at 9 o'clock at night.
Appreciate that.
It does, it does.
A lot of trust, a lot of full and trust.
Can I mention one thing on the Office of Educational Equity? I didn't mention it earlier in our budget guidelines, but it was something that was also sort of a pin in my head of, like, we need to talk about, and it ties to this, you know, are we continuing to do what we were doing before, or are we doing something different? And what does that look like over a 3-year time span with relation to the budget and this question that you just brought up?
But one of the questions would be, is blocking out her name right now, the woman who we hired. Claire. Is she going to present like a what's that plan?
Entry plan.
Thank you, thank you. An entry plan that might help us to understand what she's thinking about for the office and for the system as a whole. And I think that, that way the expert will help us to understand. And we can certainly push back on it, but at least we'll get a sense of where she's at.
You know, she'll be sharing her findings as well as sort of our vision forward for the office and how do we make, and again, we also have to recognize that especially in school districts, equity offices are a fairly new construct. And so this notion of trying to find the perfect model right now, so we just have to think about what makes sense within our organization also. And so it's easy to say, oh, well, this district has this district has that. But what we find is their application here may not be a one-to-one match. And so we just have to think about what makes sense within our system and how do we build a structure, a grower structure around it as well. And I think, again, we use the word equity ubiquitously, but what do we mean when we say that, and have we truly defined that as an organization also? So,
And what are the goals of the office?
so.
Or better, well, we have some of our goals in the strategic plan, but
As we're thinking about our own professional development or our own, I guess not professional, strategic.
it is professional.
Well, we aren't paid to do this, so it's
Doesn't
not our
matter.
professions. Anyway, our own learning, deep learning, I guess the book called it. I know I read a lot of different articles about like educational trends, and I'm just wondering, and sometimes we share them on our listserv to each other, but maybe one thing, I'm sure we're all stumbling across and reading articles all the time, and maybe even if we started sharing them with each other, the articles that we found the most interesting, not necessarily with commentary, which might violate open meeting law, but just articles we found interesting and perhaps applicable.
Yeah.
It might be a nice way to just circulate them amongst ourselves to sort of start to build our, repertoire of things that we
Right.
think are important.
I
Or
agree.
just interesting, right? Like they're informing current practice in what we're hearing about.
I like that idea, but I also think we want to do that more formally, where we all have the same readings, that we're all learning about an issue that we're confronting, so that we're more well versed.
But I think some of those articles, I'm not saying instead of that, but they might actually trigger, oh, well, we just had 3 articles about who knows what. Wow, I wonder if that's something where we should, like, there's starting to be a national issue around this or whatever, where we should really deepen our learning in that area, because it's clearly going to be something that's going to arise for us as a school committee.
There's one example of this in the context of books. I think it was last year where Gabe gave us all a book about de-leveling.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that. So I actually like those opportunities where someone says, this is what we're thinking about. So here, read about it so that we can learn as well and understand the implications of decisions we'll be asked to make.
I would have loved if we had had a follow-up where we actually talked about the book.
Yes.
Can we do this, but
we
with that
still
book?
can.
Yeah, school committee book club, heck yeah.
Well, yeah, that would need to be soon because we're actually going to have a school committee discussion of that issue at operationally pretty soon.
Well, it would have been nice, I think, like, it's great to get the book, and it would be nice to actually have the chance to reflect on it too. Sort of close the loop of not just getting the homework assignment, but like talking.
Right, I agree. All right, anything else on this governance topic?
Thank you, Linus.
Thank you all for engaging.
How about you? Anything you need as chair?
Yes, so under new business, there's another page that we have here about topics that we have lined up for
I mean, like governance wise, any like
governance wise.
that you would need to be supported.
I think as a whole, I feel very supported. I've reached out to each of you on individual issues seeking assistance, and you're always very willing to accommodate. I think we have a really good group. Okay. All right, so here we have a list of possible 23-24 docket items for discussion. So if you want to review this, let me know if there's anything you want taken off for whatever reason, but more importantly, what should be added on.
Can you add on the enrollment forecast from Cropper McKibben in, I think it's
Did
February?
we hire them to
We
do
did.
it? Oh, we did,
Yeah.
good.
We hired them, I say we, PSB hired them to do a revised enrollment. I think it's a 10-year forecast. Susan forwarded me the statement of work, the letter of engagement the other day. And so, yes, that happened. And I believe that it's not supposed to be delivered until, is that correct? January or February, right? Linus?
Right.
Yeah. So having it,
Well, is it timely enough?
it's a 10-year forecast, so it's not gonna be ready it's not gonna be ready at the beginning of the budget process. That was an ideal, but they said they couldn't deliver. They had so much work that they couldn't deliver earlier in the process. That was the earliest they could do. So, but I would like to see it on there when it comes out.
But we did have forecasts for next year from something. No, we have no forecast
I mean,
from the previous.
We did them internally.
Suzanne,
You're doing
Jody,
internal
I
stuff.
think we should schedule midterm and interim literacy data presentations also. I think there's a lot of interest in seeing how those scores have changed now that we have such robust reporting capacity.
So our next administration is January
January,
and then April.
don't we have a beginning of the year report out as well?
The report's not out yet, but we can put that together. Yep.
Perhaps we could have docket that even 3 times?
Yeah.
3 times.
Why? Yeah, no.
Because we do have those 3 data
Yeah, but
captures.
what's important is the beginning of the
You're
year
right.
and the middle of
You're
the
right.
year. Then you
Middle
can do
and the
the end of the year, but you don't have any
You're right.
real comparison stuff, or it's not much unless you compare it to the year before, but
No, you also have it against the state, but you're right, I agree with you.
Natalia's hand is up.
Sorry, Natalia?
Just a quick question. I don't know what the Thrive Act is. Apologies.
I don't know what Thrive Act is either.
does that have to do with food?
No, that's,
That was
MCAS.
MCAS.
yes.
Oh, this
Right.
is this the new MCAS repeal thing, or is this something
That's
else?
the one that, I think the Thrive Act is the one that the MTA is endorsing.
Right, to do away with the MCAS high stakes at 10th grade. I don't know if
High school.
altogether,
Or just for.
just high school,
Well,
just the high
There's
stakes.
still a rival bill being supported by the superintendent's
Yeah,
association.
that's the, that legislation is still out there as well. It's my understanding.
I have another topic I would like to request, which is that summer programming come up early in the new year. And not necessarily just gen ed, but specifically extended school year and our compliance with expected standards on hours delivered.
I also think this would be a very good area that would address one of the strategic plan goals we were talking about with respect to providing equitable programming to all.
Yes.
Summer is a good
Yes.
way to supplement whatever a child may have missed during the academic year. So in recent summers, we've had electives like photography is one of them. There are a couple others, but it's not a lot. And I think we might want
I
to,
would love that, David.
let's see what we can do to really expand that, to maybe even make summer like a full regular semester. Because that can, especially with electives,
Are you talking for high school or elementary school?
High school.
high school at a minimum. We could also explore that for elementary school, but at high school, I think that's a relatively easy lift. And that would be a way to ensure that our students are having the gamut of experiences.
So the one thing you guys should be aware of, our high school program has always been in deficit over the summer, that summer program. So in order to do it, we need to find a way that it isn't in deficit.
I'm not sure that we have data that it's actually in deficit.
I can assure you, over the years, we've always had to supplement it.
Well, I should hope we
Because-
should, because I honestly, I'm not sure that, like, I guess I should say,
Well, maybe it
the
shouldn't
amount
be
of
self,
money,
maybe it
it
shouldn't
should
be
be
self.
self-funded, because I don't know why we're talking about why we make kids pay for education in the summer and not the rest of the year. To me, this is a vital
Well,
opportunity.
it's only if they're taking something extra, not if.
I guess I think we're thinking about this in the
Yeah, you
wrong
may be
way.
right.
Yeah,
You
I
may be
think,
right.
I
I'm
think
just
that
telling
we
you what
should,
has happened.
yeah,
I think the way we can make it,
third semester.
the way we can fund it in
You gotta
part,
find money for all these things, guys.
we do, but I think a way to fund it in
Okay,
part
you find it.
is through students who are not Brookline residents. So I believe we've done some of that.
Yeah, we charge them more
And so we can try to expand that
because there's no other, the school systems around
Exactly.
here don't offer it.
If Brookline becomes the only district that has robust summer programming that's available during the year, we'll attract a lot of students from other communities. They could pay a tuition rate. And that would perhaps help defray some of these
I
costs.
would talk to the person who does the summer.
Yeah.
I think we
program
can
first.
at least propose, like, docket this,
Right.
because I think now it's in goal 5. We'll do everything possible to ensure that private resources do not determine student outcomes. So I think docketing this for an open discussion is something that we could really do towards the fulfillment of that goal, including debate whether it's feasible to do that specific thing.
Well, but
And I think it's also relevant to put something like extended day on that, and to what extent we're capable of subsidizing extended day more than we currently do.
which I think we are talking about
Yeah,
already
it's
in
a
other ways.
continuing- it's a
But I also
continuing
would say,
conversation.
like, let's not, like, there's certain things that we can do. Like, for example, for students on IEPs who have, or on 504s who have tutorial and learning center, say to them, we'd love to have you, that elective that you aren't able to take during the year, you're gonna be able to have, we're gonna have 4 different electives that you can pick from to take these classes during the summer. And that is a way to be targeted and specific without necessarily on day one throwing the barn doors open to a complete full summer program, right? Like, we can address this goal without scaring away the educators who might make it happen. So by, making it sound like everyone's gonna have to work year round. But I think offering a couple of the most popular electives as a way and saying, here, these are available to you, and and you maybe get first priority in them. Like, that would be a great way to, again,
Does BASE do that now?
give high school students with IEPs first access to classes? No.
Natalia?
I was just going to ask if we could do a deep dive on sort of disability related issues, both, like the playground accessibility, but also like, sorry, I'm echoing, but other issues around disability inequities. I think I'd like to understand those a little bit more.
That's a good
I don't know
point.
if you.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
I was going to say, that reminds me, we had a discussion late in the summer about the tennis court at Baker, but more broadly from there, about the accessibility status of all of our schools, all of
Right.
our playgrounds. So I agree, that's something that should be added here.
And we
Status.
also, on the CIP, requested a new funding specifically for modifications related to IEPs as opposed to ADAs. So having that background data would then be very vital to being able to direct those funds on the hopeful outcome that we receive those. And I thought we had asked for that already. Just hasn't happened yet. Okay. Thank you, David, for asking this question. It's so great to
Yeah.
get.
This is great.
Suzanne, how about you? Do you have anything you want to add?
I stepped out for 2 seconds. I don't know, but do we have a couple of touch points on how the strategic plan is going?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, great.
All right, anyone else? Topics?
The only other thing that is occurring to me is we still have that invitation from the Metco director. Other districts have actually conducted school committee meetings at Metco, that Metco space. That invitation is open.
All right, so let's figure out a date to do that.
Great.
I know Malcolm wanted to do it. He tried last year. Somehow the date didn't work. I think it needs to be planned far out so everybody can make sure they make it.
He wrote me
rather
an
than-
email like 2 weeks ago and said November 3rd won't work with him. He's still looking for another
Yeah, he's
date.
looking for a date.
Yeah.
Something else we might want to consider doing, just as we visit the different schools, there are also out-of-district placements. I know a lot of people appreciate that Dr. Guillory has visited our students in out-of-district placements. If there is some role for school committee at all in that, so that we're making it clear that our out-of-district students are our students, they're not others. So I'm not sure what that would be, but maybe there might be a role for us there. All right, so it sounds like we've added a few topics. I've been taking notes, and of course, Betsy with the minutes. How about in terms of tasks? So what Stephen just alluded to with Metco is not necessarily a topic to docket, but a task. Other tasks for us to undertake?
Community engagement plan. governance manual.
Another one, we had
Sustainability Advisory Committee.
talked at the summer workshop about building access to community partners, and then we'd have to talk to Brookline, to Recreation and some others about how to organize that. So I think we still have to get around to doing that.
So that actually reminds me, we need to do an update on the MOU, which I signed when I was chair in 2000 with the Parks and Rec.
Okay.
They've been looking to do that, and it just sort of keeps them falling by the wayside. Now Nancy O'Connor's no longer there. Who's the other?
chair now? No, I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe Wendy, but maybe not. I'm not sure.
And speaking of MOUs, we also need an MOU with BIG. So I had been in the initial stages of working on one with Kathy, who has since left.
Wendy.
So maybe finishing that up.
I can check. I'm the liaison. They'll meet on the first Tuesday of the month.
Also the listening sessions. So we've been talking about different school communities regarding Israel Gaza. Make sure we've got those scheduled.
Yeah, that's.
I did email, you all went to Driscoll this week.
Correct.
FRR last week. I heard from the Heath PTO. And they said that they don't have any events right now, but they are having their next in-person PTO community meeting on Friday, December 1st at 8:15. So if anyone is available that morning and would like to.
I would like, I think we talked about trying to do something sooner for each school. You know,
I understand, but they, in this case, the PTO didn't. I don't know if something else is happening sooner, but I'm just saying there is that event too. But yes, I think Linus, you saw that you were BCC'd on the email, I think, that I sent to all the parent leaders about connecting. So maybe if there's a chance, we followed up on all of them that reached out to us or that responded to that. And if there's other opportunities that happen through the principals.
Something else we might want to get working on in terms of a calendar. So every year we usually have school committee visits to the different schools, and somewhere between 2 and 4 of us show up at each one. So we might want to get those rolling.
I would love that.
Me too.
And I would love if we can get them scheduled like as far out as possible, because I think I was only able to go to one last year because they were like scheduled.
that's right. We did do it last year.
Yeah, they were scheduled, like there was the spring ones, which were, but the fall ones, I don't think I could go to at all because of, they were scheduled like a week or 2 out, and that's just not gonna happen.
Natalia?
I was just going to ask if someone, maybe Betsy, can forward if there are conversations happening around Israel-Palestine. Like, I don't think I'm in the loop always or often, so if we can just all know when they're happening. And I'd love to, I haven't done any school visits really, so I'd love to join those too. As a new member of school committee, that was chapter 4, I guess, said that I should be doing that. So, yeah.
Right, and as Mariah mentioned, to the extent that we can get dates for those well in advance, because I think last year, one issue we had, there were some that weren't attended
You're
at all.
talking about the other just regular visits.
Just regular
to
visits.
Visit the school itself.
Yeah.
There were some that had to be canceled because not one of us showed up, but in our defense, so some of these were kind of last minute. So if we have plenty of time to know what will be when, where, I think it would be better attendance.
I can do almost anything as long as it's scheduled like more than a week out. That was part of the problem, yeah.
Also, we had a discussion at the beginning about each school committee member being assigned at least one school.
Why do we want to do that?
Sort of an extension of our liaison assignments, just so there's a point person.
Like the idea is the Lincoln person goes to Pumpkin Fest and goes to like, sort of you become like a regular representative at their events.
So if each of you maybe individually contact me about which school you would like, we can work that out.
You might send out an email.
Right.
I mean, I think first preference should be to the schools where your kids are at.
Yes.
You know, that makes
Cage
it
fight,
easy.
Stephen. I said cage fight, Stephen.
Yeah, you guys can fight it.
Thumb war.
Anything else? Oh, sorry, Suzanne.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask if you're going to assign us to a school, but also kind of what are the expectations of what our role will be?
So essentially, this is part of the community engagement. So as Mariah was giving the example about Lincoln as Pumpkin Fest this Sunday, So the Lincoln person would go to Pumpkin Fest. I think maybe some of us are going to go anyway, which is fine. But making sure there's always at least one person who is going to be at all the events for that school.
And I think that person should also be in contact with the PTO and the site council. Right?
Yes, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
That would also be the point person for the PTO, school site council.
and the principal could probably know who their person is too, so that if there's events happening at the school,
Right.
like the principal might reach out and say like, hey, you want to come to, like that way there's just sort of like that connection, not looping.
Or you get the newsletter.
superintendent, Right.
And you
like-
get the newsletter. from
Exactly,
the
they could
school.
add you to the PTO newsletter. It's just an
Are
opportunity.
we getting all the newsletters? We used
Yeah, we
to.
haven't been forwarded them all.
In the
in a while.
past, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe ask the PTOs and you can just send it out as one email so that they don't have to send, or whatever.
Yeah, they were sending it to school committee. It was getting forwarded to us. We used to get a whole bunch of them forwarded like on Mondays from the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Forwarding, is there a way that the school committee email can not have to be forwarded by you, Betsy? Or we can just have it automatically go to us?
No. it doesn't look- I tried
You
to
can.
send something and I couldn't.
Betsy could set a filter on it to automatically send emails on, but there might be some more, you might not want that. Betsy might be doing some filtering on that email,
Oh, yeah.
like,
Because then I feel like that could save, when somebody responds to somebody, that might save another school committee member. That could alert another school committee member that a community member has been responded to.
but you could just CC our listserv, just write PSB school committee. You don't have to CC school committee. The school committee address is what out external people write to, and then Betsy forwards it. When you reply, if you want school committee to see it, just CC PSB school committee and that'll get to all of us.
I don't think so. I've
It does. I
tried.
do it all the time. I sent emails today to you all. When I wrote that email to Betsy, I wrote to PSB school committee and it immediately went to you all.
Never mind. Thanks.
So in terms of tasks on the vanity front, we have a plaque at the high school building, the new high school building. I don't think we ever got one for FRR. I don't know what's going on there.
Yes.
And then
That's
also
me. That's bad
Driscoll
on
and
me.
the ribbon cutting. And so there's certain ceremonial functions that we have with recent school buildings that I think we have completed.
Betsy, on that note, were we able to get our vests or whatever? Are you gonna get us our vests for our fluorescent vests to be able to go to these events and be?
I will, I was sort of putting it off till next Brookline Day.
Fluorescent?
No, wherever they are. I don't brightly bright so that it's
Why do we have
recognizable.
to, why can't we just have regular vests?
They're not good. Just wait a little bit. We'll see what they look like. I think it'd be good though, because there are all these events that happen all year long. So if we could have whatever it's gonna be, so we can wear them, that would be good. You don't have to wear your.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I have to be respectful. I'm not being- I'm just
I take that as not liking the vests, not, I don't take that personally.
I like vests. I like
It's
vests.
not like a fleece vest. It's like a thing you can wear over anything, whether it's hot or cold weather.
You mean like when the
A penny.
workers, the construction
Correct.
workers, work?
Yeah,
Oh, come on.
but not that gross.
Come on.
You do you. Or you can have a fleece vest during the summer. That'll be interesting. Or whatever it is.
There's also been a request from some community partners to maybe expand our calendar of events a bit. So for instance, I'm blanking on the official title, but the FRR Wednesday evening.
Readers and leaders. Yeah.
Readers and readers. So they would actually like to have some increased exposure. They're open to having other school communities participate as well. And to the extent that having them added to our calendar will facilitate that.
Oh, nice.
And we can do this with other events taking place at various other schools or with town partners. It doesn't have to exclusively be school sponsored.
So David, what we used to do at the beginning of the meeting centuries ago was to read off the events that were happening in the month on the calendar at the beginning of the meeting. So it gave some publicity to the different events. You might want to think about doing that at the beginning of the meeting.
I'm not sure I like it at the beginning, but I like the idea of mentioning.
Well, people are there at the
Yeah,
beginning.
no
That's
one's
the
there
only
at the
reason. I know. there's
Evidence.
nobody there.
Linus, is there an update on the website redevelopment?
Yes. And Neil is working on it. But what I told him I wanted him to do is get a group together to actually engage in that, because we're going to try to target that for the spring debut. So, yeah.
Is he doing some community focus groups.
That's what I told him. Yeah.
It's not just an internal.
Yeah, I told him I didn't want him just to take it and run with it, but to build it out a little bit.
I repeat my offer that I would
I
love.
gave him
to-
your name.
Yeah, okay.
What are you offering to
I have a lot of experience in sort of,
do?
Make sure the
Large
peer
scale.
school website.
it's like I'm an HR professional / accountant / lawyer. But I do have some experience with this. It was the joke from the book about how you're not supposed to like engage in your professional experience, but I happen to have a lot of experience in design of large educational websites, so yes.
All right, any other new business? Seeing none, I believe we are adjourned.
This is this.